Chapter 1368. Yuan Kongqing supported Chu Xiu on behalf of the demonic palace because he wanted to find an ally outside the southern region without affecting his own interests. In the end, who would have thought that Chu Xiu's growth would be too fast? It was so fast that the eastern region could no longer accommodate him. Chu Xiu was attacking the southern region, but the demonic palace was also in the southern region. So this time Yuan Kongqing had to bite the bullet and come. Of course, he did not come to stop Chu Xiu. He just wanted to persuade Chu Xiu to stop. Chu Xiu knew what Yuan Kongqing was thinking. It was human nature. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Palace Lord Yuan, you don't have to be so nervous. No matter what, you and I are allies. The world of great struggle has begun. Does it matter which region we belong to? Anyway, in the eyes of Chu Xiu, it is not important. To me, there are only enemies and friends. In this attack on the southern region, I will not touch any region where the demonic palace is located. And Palace Lord Yuan, your demonic palace can directly issue a notice that as long as any force chooses to join your demonic palace, they will be safe." Chu Xiu pointed to himself and said, "In the southern region, I will be the bad guy and you will be the good guy. In the process, how many forces your demonic palace can gather will depend on your ability." After hearing this, Yuan Kongqing's eyes suddenly showed a touch of joy. The Eastern Region Alliance's large-scale attack on the southern region had already caused panic. At this time, if the demonic palace had the ability to protect them, it was guaranteed that a large number of Jianghu forces would choose to join the demonic palace for protection. Thinking of the benefits, Yuan Kongqing did not care about the eastern region or the southern region. He directly cupped his hands and said, "In that case, I will not stand on ceremony. Cult Master Chu, rest assured that the demonic palace will always be an ally of the Kunlun devil cult and will never turn its back on you." After Yuan Kongqing left, Fang Baidu, who had witnessed the whole process, could not help shaking his head slightly. He was really not suitable to be the leader of a sect. It was not because he was stupid. After all, how many martial immortals were stupid? It was because their way of thinking was very different from the leaders of big forces like Chu Xiu. If he had been in Chu Xiu's place just now, he would most likely have threatened the Heavenly Devil Palace forcefully not to meddle in other people's business, and the result would have been a rupture between the two sides. In the end, Chu Xiu didn't do anything. He used the forces of the southern region as a favor and let the Heavenly Devil Palace leave happily. In reality, Chu Xiu had only moved his lips. The Heavenly Devil Palace belonged to the southern mountain range, and so did those sections. He, Chu Xiu, had done nothing but waste his saliva. Previously, the primordial ultimate god had said that after the passage between the upper and lower realms was opened, anyone who wanted to establish a sect could choose to go to the lower realm to do so. Not only did the sects not object to it, but they even supported it. Fang Baidu had been tempted at that time. However, after seeing how Chu Xiu managed the sect and how he dealt with the relationship with the other sects, Fang Baidu immediately gave up on the idea. However, some of the other martial immortals from the primordial ultimate god's lineage were tempted by the suggestion. They only hoped that the sects they established would not be destroyed too quickly. After sending the people from the Heavenly Devil Palace away, Chu Xiu led the disciples of the entire Eastern Region Alliance toward the World Sword sect. Wherever they passed, those forces did not even have the intention to resist. They either surrendered or fled. However, most of them fled. Although Chu Xiu didn't care about the division between the Eastern region and the Southern region, those small forces cared. Chu Xiu didn't force too much on such forces. After all, they weren't his target. They approached the heavenly sword peak of the World Sword sect. At that moment, the World Sword sect was in a state of despair. The cultivators of the World Sword sect had always been very arrogant. Because of Luo Shan, a ninth heaven powerhouse, in the eyes of the cultivators of the World Sword sect, apart from the Taoist sects and Buddhist sects, they didn't care about anyone else in the Daoist world. Although the failure to attack the eastern region was a great blow to them, Luo Shan's death was an even greater blow to them. Mu Baishuang wore white mourning clothes and had a cold expression on his face. After Luo Shan's death, he became the new sect master of the World Sword Sect. Seeing this situation, Mu Baishuang said coldly, "Why are you all panicking? What kind of storms has the World Sword Sect not weathered? Previously, we failed to take down the High Heaven Sect in the eastern region. Now, Chu Xiu won't be able to take down the World Sword Sect either." Guixia said faintly, "But don't forget how many martial immortals Chu Xiu has under him. Chu Xiu, Chen Qingdi, Wei Shiya, Qin Baiyuan, Zhong Qiushui, Fang Baidu, Su Tianya. A total of 7 martial immortals. What about us? The old and weak. Our injuries haven't healed yet." Xingjiu Yuan was disheartened and returned to his secret realm. Mu Shenshao of the War God sect and Tao Qianming of the Great Thousand sect were scared out of their wits. They asked for help everywhere and even prepared to move their sections. How can we fight them with just the few of us? At this time, a blue longsword flickered with a glimmer of light. "Let me do it. I don't have a physical body anymore. Let me fuse with the Through Heaven sword. Sect Master, you can control the Through Heaven sword and fight with Chu Xiu and the others." This blue longsword contained the soul of Sword Venerable Blue Sea, Mingjilan. His physical body had been destroyed by Chen Qingdi, but he had cultivated a soul origin secret technique, so he could maintain the integrity of his soul. However, he hadn't decided whether to rebuild his physical body with a divine object or to take over someone else's body, so he temporarily placed his soul origin in his divine longsword. Mu Baishuang shook his head and said, "It won't work. The power of the Through Heaven sword is too strong. It is a part of the power of heaven and earth." In the past, the old sect master could fuse his soul origin into the Through Heaven sword because he could prevent his soul origin from being corroded by the Through Heaven sword. However, you can't do it. If you fuse your soul origin into the Through Heaven sword, you will be completely assimilated by the sword spirit's power in less than 3 breaths of time. It will be meaningless. Don't think so much. Activate the sword formation and fight to the end. The mountain guarding formation of the World Sword Sect was called a sword formation. That's right, it didn't have any other messy names. It was a sword formation, a formation that could unleash the power of the sword Dao to its peak. Outside the Through Heaven Sword Sect, Chu Xiu asked Fang Qi Shao, "You have been in the World Sword Sect for so long. Do you know how to break the formation of the World Sword Sect?" Fang Qi Shao rolled his eyes and said, "Do you think I'm the kind of person who knows how to break the formation?" He was obviously ignorant, but when Fang Qi Shao said it, there was a sense of pride in it. It was as if he didn't know how to be proud. However, at the next moment, Fang Qi Shao looked at the Through Heaven Sword Sect and a conflicted expression appeared in his eyes. He said softly, "When the battle starts, I won't make a move. After all, the people from the World Sword Sect have treated me quite well. Also, Luo Shan is already dead. The World Sword Sect won't be a threat to you anymore. Do you really have to make a move?" Chu Xiu shook his head slightly. Fang Qi Shao wasn't a goody two-shoes. However, although he seemed unreliable, he was actually a person who valued relationships the most. If it was someone else, Chu Xiu would definitely be too lazy to explain to him. However, this person was Fang Qi Shao. Chu Xiu could only sigh and said, "You have been in the pugilistic world for so long. Haven't you seen it clearly? It's easier said than done if you want the world to be at peace. You feel that the World Sword Sect is treating you well because you have talent and potential. That's why the World Sword Sect is treating you well. There is hatred without reason in this world, but there is no love without reason. They treat you well only because you have value in return. If a down-and-out swordsman begged the World Sword Sect, what would the World Sword Sect do? They would chase him out like a dog. The World Sword Sect had never been benevolent. Back in the lower realm, they had killed 90% of their disciples in order to survive. In the pugilistic world, there was no such thing as right or wrong. There was only what should be done and what shouldn't be done. The Eastern Territory never had the intention to attack the Southern Territory. They only wanted to defend their territory. However, the battle with the World Sword Sect caused the Imperial Sky Pavilion to suffer heavy losses. 80% of the High Heaven Sect's disciples died. Out of the 3 martial immortals, only 1 was left. Were they not innocent? Today, I attacked the World Sword Sect because I want a day when no one dares to attack the Kunlun Devil cult. No one dares to kill my brothers, my friends, and my fellow sect members. Chu Xiu's voice was slightly cold. Of course, the pugilistic world in reality was even colder than that. Fang Qi Xiao laughed self-deprecatingly. Brother Chu, I was naive. Perhaps the sect master was right. I am indeed not suitable to take over the position of Sword King City Lord. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, You are not naive. This is just your heart. If you don't want to change, then don't change. It's too wasteful to use your talent in intrigue and killing. One day, when you can stand at the peak of Sword Dao, you will be able to control your own fate and the fate of others. Look at Brother Lu. He has always done well. He doesn't care about good or evil. He doesn't distinguish right or wrong. He only follows his heart. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, Brother Lu can't distinguish between good and evil. He doesn't know right from wrong. However, what right do outsiders have to impose their views on me? Hearing Chu Xiu mention him, Lu Fengxian tilted his head. Brother Chu, Brother Fang, did you call me? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, No, I'm just praising you. With such an interruption, Fang Qi Xiao seemed to have thought it through. He smiled and said, Being sentimental really doesn't suit me. Since I'm following my heart, then you guys can make a move next. I'm a soft-hearted person. I can't bear to use weapons. There are a few young sisters and big sisters in the Imperial Sky Pavilion who are not bad. I'll go and have a heart-to-heart talk with them. Fang Qi Xiao was still talking nonsense. In the next moment, the sword intent on the sky-piercing sword peak soared into the sky. As the sword formation of the Under Heaven Sword Sect was activated, Chu Xiu only had one feeling at that moment. It was as though what was erected in front of him was not a mountain peak of the sect, but a huge sword that reached into the clouds. Many disciples of Under Heaven Sword Sect were hidden in the formation as they looked at the people below with vigilance. The corner of Chu Xiu's lips curled into a smile. He had unleashed the heavenly demon creation power to the extreme. Streams of demonic aura pierced through the void, stirring up the heaven and earth and causing the weather to change. Chu Xiu's voice resonated in the clouds along with this power. Kunlun's Chu Xiu is here to pay a visit to the mountain. Chapter 1369. Chu Xiu's voice resounded through the heaven sword peak. His powerful demonic chi roared like thunder, causing the towering through the heaven sword peak to tremble slightly. The cultivators of the sword sect turned pale. Mu Baishuang's voice came from above, Chu Xiu, if you want to attack the sword sect of the world, it should be High Heaven Sect. Your Kunlun Devil cult clearly suffered the least losses in this battle, yet you're attacking my sect under the banner of revenge. How ridiculous. Chu Xiu said lightly, My Kunlun Devil cult suffered the least losses because my Kunlun Devil cult has the strength to do so. If I had come a little late back then, after your sword sect of the world destroyed High Heaven Sect, what awaited me would have been the encirclement of your sword sect of the world, right? Mu Baishuang, I won't say any more high-sounding words. Since ancient times, the winner takes all. I only ask you one question. Your sword sect of the world, will you surrender or not? Mu Baishuang didn't even think about it and said directly, the sword sect of the world has never surrendered. We won't surrender in the past and we won't surrender in the future. Chu Xiu praised, a swordsman would rather break than bend. You really have backbone. However, if the sword sect of the world doesn't surrender today, there won't be a future. Chu Xiu's expression changed instantly and he shouted, Kill. Break the formation. Following Chu Xiu's order, a total of 7 martial immortal realm powerhouses, including himself, surrounded the sword sect of the world's spirit array and began to attack it. The sword array of the world's sword sect had taken the entire sword sect of the world 10,000 years to set up. Who knew how many layers of spirit arrays there were? Normally, the fastest way to break a spirit array like this was to break it with force. No matter how many layers of spirit arrays there were, they would all be smashed. It was the same when the sword sect of the world attacked High Heaven sect previously. 80% of High Heaven sect spirit arrays were smashed by the Through Heaven sword. At that moment, although Chu Xiu's side did not have a killing weapon on the level of the Through Heaven sword, with the 7 martial immortals joining hands, they were still able to shake the sword formation of the entire sword sect of the world. Surging sword chi wrapped around the sky-piercing sword. It was the purest form of sword intent. Although it lacked some changes, any attack that landed on the sword formation would be destroyed by the pure sword intent. Even the power of rules would be the same. Chu Xiu shouted in a low voice, "Focus on one point." As soon as he said that, Chu Xiu's body swelled up in size in an instant. His demon deity body, which was thousands of zhang tall, appeared, and the great power brought about by the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth bombarded the Skirich sword with his punches. The pure power of his punches tore apart the sword beams. Wuxia condensed all the energy in his body and transformed it into a thread of rootless sacred flame. He attacked the array formation that had been destroyed. The power of the rootless sacred flame was the purest form of power of the heavens and earth. In the past, when Wuxia activated the rootless sacred flame, he was even able to temporarily trap Yi Weikong, who had reached the 8th heaven. Although he did not have the rootless sacred flame by his side now, he had only condensed a thread of energy. However, it was enough to cut a crack in the array formation. Fang Baidu formed a seal at the back. Boundless moonlight enveloped the surroundings of the crack, causing the sword chi in the other parts of the array formation to be unable to repair the crack. Qinqing Di, Su Tianya, Qin Baiyuan, and Zhong Qiushui unleashed all their powers and started attacking the crack in the array formation. Under their powerful attacks, the crack finally expanded gradually. The surrounding array formation was also torn apart, letting out a series of explosions. Mu Baishuang frowned. Ignoring his injuries, he channeled all his power into the crack in the array formation. In an instant, countless sword beams appeared and slashed towards Chu Xiu in an overwhelming manner. However, Chu Xiu used the indestructible holy demon body on top of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth and used the simplest form of power to suppress Mu Baishuang's power. Mu Baishuang's face was filled with shock. He could sense that Chu Xiu had already reached the 4th heaven of the martial immortal realm. However, he had only risen by 1 heaven. Why was the difference in power so great? The sword beams were gradually suppressed. In the end, they were all shattered by Chu Xiu. Mu Baishuang suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He could no longer maintain the operation of the array formation. Withdrawing the state of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu had already condensed the apocalyptic flame on the formation-breaking blade in his hand. He was prepared to completely destroy the array formation. He slashed out with the devouring blade. The powerful blade intent twisted the rules of heaven and earth, forming a huge black hole that slashed towards the crack in the array formation. Just as Mu Baishuang was about to burn his blood essence to repair the crack in the array formation, an erratic voice suddenly came from the air. "Suppress." A Daoist seal that was floating in the air smashed down. With a loud boom, regardless of whether it was Chu Xiu's devouring blade or the attacks of the others, they were all shattered by that Daoist seal. Furthermore, that Daoist seal seemed to be made of white jade. It was even emitting a dense Daoist connotation as it repaired the broken array formation of the world sword sect. The crowd looked towards the sky and saw an old man wearing a purple Tai Chi Daoist robe. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and descended on a majestic crane. He cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and the others and said, "I am Zheng Tai of the Three Pristine's Palace. My Daoist name is Qi Cheng. Greetings, Cult Master Chu." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. The old Daoist in front of him was not simple. His cultivation should be at the 8th heaven. Furthermore, he was different from Yi Weikong, who relied on becoming a demon to step into the 8th heaven. This old Daoist's aura was condensed to the extreme. His Daoist connotation was hidden and he was unfathomable. He was much stronger than Yi Weikong. Of course, none of the Daoists from the Three Pristines Palace were weak. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, Daoist priest Qi Cheng, our Kunlun devil cult has never had any enmity with the Three Pristines Palace. I wonder why Daoist priest Qi Cheng is stopping us now. Daoist priest Qi Cheng had a warm smile on his face as he said, the Three Pristines Palace has no intention of becoming enemies with Cult Master Chu. However, the ceiling array formation of the Daoyuo Divine Palace has begun to crack on a large scale. Dao Master is certain that the array formation will break within a month and the upper and lower worlds will be connected. Therefore, at this time, Dao Master hopes that the entire Daoyuotian kingdom can settle down and there will be no more large-scale conflicts. In the West region, Dao Master has personally mediated the conflict between the World Lord and the Master of Sanskrit. In the South region, Cult Master Chu, please stop. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, Daoist priest Qi Cheng, I have already fought my way to the gates of the World Sword sections. I am only one step away from completely taking down the World Sword sections. Even if you have the Three Pristines Palaces backing, isn't it a little too much to interrupt me at this critical moment? Why do I feel that the Three Pristines Palace is specifically targeting me this time? Daoist priest Qi Cheng shook his head and said, Cult Master Chu is wrong. The Three Pristines Palace has never targeted anyone, and there is no need to do so. It is all just a coincidence. Cult Master Chu has a great enmity with the Master of the Star River Martial Arts Academy, Meng Xinghe. Cult Master Chu, do you know why Meng Xinghe did not make a move when you left the East region? It was the Dao Master who personally asked Meng Xinghe to stop temporarily. The Three Pristines Palace has always treated everyone equally. Cult Master Chu, you did not suffer any losses. Chu Xiu chuckled. I did not suffer any losses, but I did not gain any advantages either. However, if I had rejected the Three Pristines Palace's suggestion, I'm afraid that Daoist priest Qi Cheng's Taoist seal would have smashed on my head, right? Daoist priest Qi Cheng shook his head and said, Cult Master Chu, you must be joking. The Three Pristines Palace has always convinced people with virtue. Why would we do such a thing? Apart from the initial reason, Chu Xiu did not believe a single word that Daoist priest Qi Cheng had said. Convince people with virtue? There was no sect that convinced people with virtue in the pugilistic world. If there was, it would have been destroyed long ago. A moment later, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, since this matter was ordered by the Dao Master, I will give face to the Dao Master and the Three Pristines Palace. I will stop this time. However, I have brought so many people to the South region. I can't possibly return empty-handed, can I? As long as the Sword sect agrees to give me something, I will retreat. Daoist priest Qi Cheng immediately turned his gaze to Mu Baishuang and asked, Sect leader Mu, you have heard what Cult Master Chu said. Are you willing to agree to his condition? Mu Baishuang frowned slightly. He knew that Daoist priest Qi Cheng was not on his side. The other party only needed the Daoyuotian people to be peaceful during this period. Therefore, Mu Baishuang could not refuse at all. However, he still asked, what does Chu Xiu want? Do I have to give him the Heavenly Sword sect's Heavenly Sword too? Chu Xiu said indifferently, don't worry. I don't want the Heavenly Sword sect's Heavenly Sword. What I want is something useless to you. In the battle 500 years ago, the Sword sect collected quite a lot of blood essence from that person, right? I don't want anything else. I only want the blood essence of that person 500 years ago. Other than Chu Xiu's desire to expand his territory in the southern barbaric land and revenge on the surface, Chu Xiu's main purpose for attacking the Sword sect this time was actually Dugu Weiwei's blood essence. In the East region, the blood essence of the Imperial Sky Pavilion and High Heaven sect had been plundered by him. In the southern region, the blood essence of the Devil Dao lineage was also in Chu Xiu's hands. The only one left who participated in the battle 500 years ago was the Sword sect. The Sword sect must have Dugu Weiwei's blood essence in their sect. To the current Chu Xiu, this thing was even more useful than the 9 Revolutions divine pill. After swallowing it, he could immediately digest it and his strength would increase tremendously. It could be said to be a must-have for home cultivation. Of course, only the current Chu Xiu could refine this thing. If anyone else tried to refine it, they would only be courting death. Actually, in this battle, Chu Xiu did not intend to attack the sword sect just like that. Although the sword sect was currently weak, they still had several trump cards. Therefore, the minimum requirement of Chu Xiu was to get Dugu Weiwei's blood essence. Taoist priest Qi Cheng looked at Mu Baishuang and said with a slight smile on his face, "Sect leader Mu, there is a price to pay. Don't lose the big for the small." Mu Baishuang sighed. The Three Pure Palace needed the stability of the Daoyu Ocean. In the eyes of Taoist priest Qi Cheng, Chu Xiu's request was not excessive. If he forcefully refused to give it, Taoist priest Qi Cheng might stand on his side. "I'll give it to you." As he spoke, Mu Baishuang immediately sent someone to the treasure pavilion to dig out Dugu Weiwei's blood essence and threw it to Chu Xiu. After receiving it, Chu Xiu cupped his fists at Taoist priest Qi Cheng. "Please send my regards to the sect leader. As long as no one comes to find trouble with me during this period, the East region will not take any action." Taoist priest Qi Cheng smiled and nodded. "Take care, Cult Master Chu." Chapter 1370. During his trip to the Eastern Domain, although the sword sect of the world was not destroyed, Chu Xiu had almost achieved what he wanted to achieve. Almost breaking through the sword sect of the world allowed High Heaven sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion to vent their anger and become even more loyal. At the same time, other cultivators who were reluctant to join the Eastern Domain Alliance before, after seeing the true strength of the Kunlun Devil cult, also submitted. At the very least, they no longer dared to make any overt actions. Of course, the most important thing was that Chu Xiu obtained Dugu Weiwei's blood essence. The amount of Dugu Weiwei's blood essence that the World Sword Sect had collected was actually the most. But thinking about it, it was normal. After the Sword Sect of the world obtained this blood essence, they should not have wasted a single drop. The Sword Sect of the world were all swordsmen. There were too few cultivators who studied other miscellaneous Daoists, or rather, none at all. So, after obtaining Dugu Weiwei's blood essence, they felt that they could not refine it, so they stored it away. Refining Dugu Weiwei's blood essence was almost the best way for Chu Xiu to increase his strength at this stage. There were 9 heavenly layers of martial immortal, and each heavenly layer required a comprehension of the power of laws and the accumulation of power. Chu Xiu was very confident in his comprehension, and he was also very confident in his combat effectiveness. When fighting against martial immortals whose realms were far beyond his own, Chu Xiu was naturally able to comprehend the power of various laws. But there was no way to accumulate power. It could either rely on external objects or time. Chu Xiu was now at the 4th heavenly layer. In fact, his first and second heavenly layers relied on the power of the Daoyu Divine Palace. The 3rd heavenly layer relied on the power brought about by the collision of yin and yang sources, and the 4th heavenly layer relied on the accumulation of power. He comprehended laws in continuous battles and did not need too much power to support him. Without these external objects, although Chu Xiu had the confidence to step into the next heavenly layer, he might need several years or even more than 10 years to accumulate strength. After successfully refining more than 20 drops of Dugu Weiwei's blood essence, although it did not allow Chu Xiu to directly cross over to the 1st layer, it had pushed his strength to the peak of the 4th layer. He only needed an opportunity, and with Chu Xiu's understanding of the power of rules, stepping into the 5th layer would not be a problem. This process was very fast. Chu Xiu only used a few days to complete it. However, when he came out, he saw Wuxia and the others waiting for him outside. Chu Xiu touched his nose and asked curiously, "Did something happen in the outside world?" Wuxia and the others said helplessly, "The 3 pristine temples said that the exalted divine palace's formation would collapse within a month. When the upper and lower realms are connected, what are we going to do? The Daoyu Ocean is a Kunlun Devil cult, and the lower realm is a Kunlun Devil cult. As long as one is not blind or deaf, they will know who we are. Haven't you thought about how to deal with it?" Wuxia had been worried about this all this time. After the upper and lower realms were connected, their identities could no longer be hidden. They thought of many ways, but found that there were too many loopholes. There was no way to hide it. When Chu Xiu heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. So that's what you're worried about. Is it not worth worrying about? Mei Qinglian said. Chu Xiu waved his hand. I've been thinking about this since the day the Elysium was destroyed. We don't need to hide it, nor can we. Whether it's the Daoist or the lower realm, Chu Xiu, am the master of the Kunlun devil cult, and now the master of the entire Eastern Territory. As long as you have the strength in your hands, the Daoist sects will not care whether you are from the lower realm or the upper realm. In other words, if I, Chu Xiu, did not have the strength, the Kunlun devil cult would not have been able to establish a foothold in the Daoist world, and it would have been destroyed long ago. When they heard Chu Xiu's words, they finally realized that they had gotten themselves into a dead end on this matter. The so-called Daoist and the lower realm did not need to be clearly distinguished. As long as they had the strength, what was the difference between the Daoist world and the lower realm? Chu Xiu quickly said, but even so, my Kunlun devil cult has foundations in both the Daoist world and the lower realm. When the time comes, there will inevitably be some friction, so we must be prepared for this. By the way, have the sky keys of High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion been delivered? We should also follow the Daoist world to the lower realm. Chu Xiu controlled the overlapping space between the two worlds, so he did not need a key. But this time, all the Daoist cultivators needed to go through the Daoist Divine Palace's spirit array to the lower realm. Chu Xiu did not want to expose the entrance to the overlapping space. Although as long as his identity was exposed, some people would definitely guess it, Chu Xiu still chose to go to the lower realm with the Daoist sects. The sky key was the key to crossing between the upper and lower realms. This thing was actually not mysterious. It was a kind of rare treasure formed by the distortion of the space principles, and after being reinforced by a spirit array, it would become a sky key. Before the people from the lower realm came to the Daoist world, they were in too much of a hurry due to the great ancient tribulation, so they collected very few materials and refined even fewer sky keys, which led to most of them being left behind in the lower realm. After arriving in the Daoist world, many sects learned from this painful experience and collected a lot of materials to refine sky keys. The Daoist world was rich in resources, and although there were not many of these mineral veins, there was no shortage of them. Even if the sky keys were temporarily useless, the major sects kept them in their sects, so whether it was a large or a small Daoist sect, or an ancient venerable, no one lacked these things. Chu Xiu naturally did not have these things, so he asked High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion for some. After arranging for some people to guard the Daoist Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu took Wei Shiya and the others, as well as Tang Ye and several dozen other elite cultivators, into the Daoist Divine Palace to wait for the spirit array to shatter. At this time, there were already many sects waiting in front of the Daoist Divine Palace. The most eye-catching were the people from the Dao sect of the Northern Territory and the Buddhist sect of the Western Territory. The Dao master's entire figure was shrouded in a profound Dao accumulation, making it impossible to see his appearance. The appearance of the world master was somewhat beyond Chu Xiu's expectations, almost like a wandering ascetic monk. If it were not for his imposing manner and the presence of Zen master Ji Shan, Fa Jing, and the others accompanying him, Chu Xiu would not have believed that the person in front of him was the Heavenly Treasure Temple's world master of this generation. As soon as Chu Xiu appeared, the Brahmin sect's hierarch turned to look at him. The pressure of a ninth heaven master had reached the point where it could distort the weather. Good and evil were two sides, but both eyes were staring at Chu Xiu with malice. The yin and yang forces in front of Chu Xiu were entangled and collided with each other. This was the power of creation, and it offset the pressure brought by the other party's gaze. The sect master's eyes flashed with astonishment, but before he could do anything, the world's sovereign and the Dao's sovereign turned to look at him at the same time. This immediately caused the sect master to retract his gaze and close his eyes to rest. After a while, many people from Gu Zun's lineage also arrived, led by Meng Xinghe. However, Meng Xinghe acted as if he did not see Chu Xiu and directly ignored him. The Dao master had said that the Daoist devil cult must ensure stability before entering the lower worlds. Even if the old barbarian king was not here and Chu Xiu was right in front of him, Meng Xinghe would not act. Because he knew that once he acted, the Tao Master would definitely stop him. He never did such a useless thing. Chu Xiu touched his chin. He suddenly realized that he seemed to have offended too many people. He had formed a death feud with two Ninth Heaven Masters at the same time. It was estimated that there was no other person like him in the entire Daoist devil cult. As the time approached, more and more sects arrived, as well as some rogue cultivators. Basically, all the forces that were qualified to refine the heavenly key were here. But at this moment, the laws inside the exalted divine palace distorted, and an old Taoist dressed in a slightly sloppy outfit walked out. Seeing the old Taoist appear, the Tao accumulation around the Tao Master dissipated, revealing his true appearance. It was an old Taoist wearing a silver Taoist robe with cloud patterns. Although he was old, his appearance was square and elegant. He had 3 long strands of beard, and the Tao accumulation was flowing in his eyes. His every move seemed to be in harmony with the world and nature. It could be said that he had the charm of an immortal just by looking at his appearance. At the very least, he looked better than the sloppy old Taoist. But when Chu Xiu saw the old Taoist, his pupils immediately shrank. The old Taoist was actually Ning Xuanji. But Chu Xiu remembered that Ning Xuanji seemed to have said that he wanted to comprehend the power of the initial laws in the exalted divine palace, so he wouldn't return to the lower realm. Why did he appear again? At this time, the Tao Master bowed to Ning Xuanji and said, "Senior, you're here." These few words caused everyone present to be instantly horrified. Only the world's sovereign, the sect master of Sanskrit, and a few others knew of Ning Xuanji's existence and identity. As far as they were concerned, Tao Master was practically the #1 person in Daoist heaven. However, he had addressed the sloppy old Taoist as a senior and treated him with such respect. Who exactly was this old Taoist? At this moment, everyone present suddenly had a feeling. The waters of the Daoist Ocean seemed to be very deep. They thought that they knew the Daoist Ocean people very well, but in fact, they were far from qualified. Ning Xuanji casually waved his hand and said, "What do you mean I'm here? I'm going home. Have you forgotten where I came from?" The Tao Master chuckled and said, "Of course we haven't forgotten, Senior. Don't worry, we are also from the ancestral land. This time, you are going home, and so are we, not like the Daoist Ocean who came 10,000 years ago. We are connected by blood and cultivation techniques. Since we're going home, of course we won't kill." Ning Xuanji looked at the Tao Master with a faint smile. "Daoist Xiantian, if I remember correctly, your Daoist name is Xiantian, right? You're much stronger than your master. He's an honest guy who has cultivated to the point of becoming a fool. You're stronger than him. There's no need to talk so much. You're going to the lower realm to find what you want, and I'm also going to find what I want. One is east, and the other is south. There's no conflict. As long as you don't go too far, this Tao Master can't be bothered to meddle in other people's business." The Tao Master nodded slightly and said, "Senior, you must be joking. My master has his Tao, and so do I. Our Tao is connected to the heavens, and there's no difference in strength. I will set the rules for the lower realm with them. We're of the same race, not those barbarians. No one dares to kill wantonly." Chapter 1371. Ning Xuanji's appearance here was a little out of Chu Xiu's expectations. Moreover, his relationship with the Daoist Ocean was also worth pondering. Among the top powerhouses of the Ninth Heaven present, it seemed that only the Tao Master would communicate with him as an equal and even dare to test him. Endless starlight flickered in Meng Xinghe's eyes. No one could see his expression, but Chu Xiu discovered that the moment Ning Xuanji appeared, he took half a step back. The bamboo hat on the world's sovereign's head covered his face. Although it was impossible to see his expression, the world's sovereign slightly lowered his head the moment Ning Xuanji appeared. As for the sect master of the Sanskrit sect, his reaction was even more obvious. The moment Ning Xuanji appeared, his body slightly tensed up. A complicated look appeared in his eyes. Clearly, he had dealt with Ning Xuanji before. Moreover, Ning Xuanji had left a bad impression on him. Ning Xuanji glanced at everyone present. He also saw Chu Xiu, but his gaze didn't linger on Chu Xiu for too long. I've said it before, this Dao master is just going home to take a look and pick up some things. As long as you don't go too far, I won't care. Why are you all so nervous? This Dao master isn't going to eat you. While the two sides were talking, a violent tremor suddenly came from the exalted divine palace. The formation that sealed the passage between the two worlds began to shatter like an avalanche. The passage between the two worlds had already been completely opened. From the outside, one could even see the turbulent spatial storm. The Dao master let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, it's time to go home." With that, the Dao master stepped into the passage with the sky-connecting key in hand. The others present glanced at each other before stepping into the passage one after another. Just as the Daoist cultivators were preparing to enter the lower realm, more cultivators had gathered at the heaven gate in Kunlun. The Daoist could feel the formation shattering, and it was naturally even more obvious in the lower realm. After plundering the Elysium gate, Chu Xiu stayed there for a while to absorb the powerful energy pouring out of the exalted divine palace. However, as the rift grew larger, more and more primordial qi leaked out. The primordial qi between the upper and lower realms became balanced. The primordial qi in the heavenly gates was only slightly more than the outside world. It was not of much value, so Chu Xiu withdrew everyone. Seeing that the people from the Kunlun devil cult had left, the people from the other sects would not let go of this opportunity. They all sent people over to check, but they also discovered that the formation was broken. Thinking back to what Chu Xiu had told them before, there was another world behind this spirit array. Those martial artists from 10,000 years ago had gone to that world. What was the situation there? At this time, many warriors had gathered in front of the Gate of Heaven's sealing array formation. People from the major sects in the Jianghu and even the royal families of the three countries had sent people over. Among them, the most eye-catching ones were the ones standing at the front, the martial immortals. Previously, everyone had thought that the Elysium realm was the peak. But as the primordial qi from the upper realm spread to the lower realm, the level of primordial qi in the entire world rose by a level. Those martial artists who had been stuck at a bottleneck discovered that their bottleneck had loosened. This was especially true for the top sects with legacies. Their breakthroughs were even more astonishing. The first to bear the brunt was Yi Xiaonan. As someone who could step into the second heavenly layer of martial immortal in the lower realm's primordial qi, even Chu Xiu had to admit that Yi Xiaonan was the true genius. Now that the primordial qi was abundant, Yi Xiaonan directly crossed 2 heavenly layers and reached the 4th heavenly layer. Because the old celestial master was old, he did not dare to make a breakthrough. But now, with his powerful primordial qi foundation, the old celestial master had stepped into the martial immortal realm. He had even reached the 3rd heavenly layer in one go. Apart from Yi Xiaonan and the old celestial master, there were 2 other people in the lower realm who had stepped into the martial immortal realm. One of them was the Ying family's ancestor. Among the profound understanding realm martial artists in the lower realm, the Ying family's ancestor's age and strength were among the top. He had also successfully broken through his bottleneck and stepped into the martial immortal realm. Moreover, he had quickly stabilized his cultivation and stepped into the 2nd heavenly layer. As for the last person, most people did not expect him to be Shen Baochen from the Sword Hut. Among the profound understanding realm martial artists in the lower realm, Shen Baochen was one of the younger ones. He was not even from the same era as the Ying family's ancestor. Although he was not weak, he was not as talented as Yi Xiaonan. But Shen Baochen had one advantage: he kept a low profile. He rarely appeared in the pugilistic world, and the Sword Hut rarely interfered with the affairs of the pugilistic world. But every time Shen Baochen appeared, his strength would increase slightly. He could be said to be a person who fought steadily and secluded himself like a madman. Under such circumstances, Shen Baochen had also stepped into the 1st heavenly layer of martial immortal not long ago. Originally, he had planned to enter seclusion to stabilize his cultivation. But because of such a major event, he could only give up on his seclusion and wait with the others for the unknown person from the upper realm to appear. The Ying family's ancestor frowned and said, "Where did Chu Xiu go? Where did the people from the Kunlun devil cult go? Why hasn't a single one of them come?" The old celestial master shook his head. "I don't know. I've sent people to the southern barbaric land to ask, but the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult refuse to tell me. As for Western Kunlun, it's completely empty. Only some low-level disciples were left behind to guard the place." The Ying family's ancestor glanced at Yi Xiaonan, but did not speak. He knew that Yi Xiaonan would not ask about Chu Xiu's whereabouts. Why has Chu Xiu been so mysterious all these years? Why hasn't he appeared for such a major event? As the number one sect in the pugilistic world, the Kunlun devil cult has gone too far. There was a hint of resentment and dissatisfaction in the Ying family's ancestor's tone. In the past, the Ying family's ancestor would not have dared to say this. But now that he had also stepped into the martial immortal realm, he felt that he was in the same realm as Chu Xiu. The Ying family's ancestor seemed to have become inflated, and he did not fear Chu Xiu as much anymore. At this moment, a cracking sound came from the ceiling formation. The runes of the formation exploded like an avalanche. The powerful aura immediately caused everyone present to retreat. After a while, just as everyone was about to go closer to see what was going on, a powerful aura came from within. Dao Master's figure was the first to walk out. When he saw Yi Xiaonan and the other cultivators from the lower realm, a look of astonishment appeared in his eyes. He had guessed that the lower realm cultivators would definitely sense the movement of the formation and come to investigate. But he did not expect that the strength of the cultivators from the lower realm would be so weak. Was this their original strength, or were they not all present? How did a world of this level produce peak powerhouses like Dugu Weiwei and Ningxuanji? As Dao Master walked out, the Daoist cultivators walked out of the formation one after another. Feeling the powerful auras, the eyes of all the cultivators present, including Yi Xiaonan, were filled with shock. Before, they had also imagined how strong the Daoist cultivators were. Just like how Dao Master did not expect the lower realm to be so weak, they did not expect the Daoist cultivators to be this strong. There were dozens of people who had reached the martial immortal realm like them. The auras of Dao Master, World Master, and the others were especially powerful. They were like a towering mountain, so high that they could not see the end of it. At this moment, the Ying family's ancestor suddenly noticed something. He pointed at the Daoist cultivators with a horrified expression. Even his voice had changed. Chu Xiu. Cult Master Chu. Why are you over there? Hearing the Ying family's ancestors' words, the crowd finally reacted. Who else could it be but Chu Xiu following behind the Daoist cultivators? They could not have mistaken him for someone else, because Wuxia, Shang Tianliang, Qinqing Di, and the other Kunlun devil cult cultivators were also following behind Chu Xiu. At this time, the Daoist cultivators also felt that something was wrong. Why would someone from the lower realm know Chu Xiu? The master of Sanskrit suddenly turned to Chu Xiu and asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" At this time, Chu Xiu could not hide it, nor did he intend to. He smiled and said, "Of course I am me. Who else could I be? I am Chu Xiu, the master of the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu. I am the Kunlun devil cult of the lower realm, and also the Daoist Kunlun devil cult." At this moment, not only did the Ying family's ancestor and the others understand, but the Daoist cultivators also understood. No wonder they had always felt that Chu Xiu's existence was very uncomfortable. He was not a Daoist at all. But after understanding this, the emotions of both sides were different. The Ying family's ancestor and the others in the lower realm felt that they had been fooled. The excuses used to attack the heavenly gate were all prepared by Chu Xiu from the beginning. Moreover, they had been wondering why Chu Xiu's strength had improved so quickly. They could understand why Chu Xiu was strong. After all, the master of the devil cult was a genius. But the people under Chu Xiu's command had also improved so quickly. This was simply unreasonable. Could it be that as long as they followed Chu's show, their talent and potential could change? Only now did they know that all of this was because of the Daoist cultivators. What bullsh *t. We agreed to cultivate together, but you secretly cheated. Of course, because of their strength, the Ying family's ancestor and the others were not too angry. They just felt sullen. But the Daoist sects, especially those who had fought with Chu's show, were really angry. They felt that they had been fooled. Chu's show had brought the power of his subordinates into the Daoist and created such a top force out of thin air. This was simply stealing the luck of the Daoist people. Previously, the World Sword sect did not understand why Chu's show could find a sword genius like Fang Qishao to join the World Sword sect as a spy. Now it seemed that Fang Qishao was a martial artist from the lower realm. No wonder they could not find any information about Fang Qishao. Although both the upper and lower realms had been fooled by Chu's show, it was obvious that the Daoist people were even more furious. The master of Sanskrit shouted, "How dare you deceive the whole Daoist people, Chu's show!" Chapter 1372. Attitude stemmed from strength. Chu's show's behavior in the lower realm only made the Ying family old ancestor and the others feel aggrieved, but not too angry. In any case, the Kunlun devil cult had grown to this extent and they were no match for Chu's show, so what was the use of being angry? However, the Daoist cultivators all looked at Chu's show with hostility, and even the people from High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion who had joined Chu's show felt a little awkward. Chu's show said lightly, "You think I'm deceiving the Daoist?" The Dao Venerable said before that the Daoist and the lower realm are of the same origin. Since we are all on the same side, how could I deceive them? I have the Kunlun devil cult in the lower realm, but I also have the Kunlun devil cult in the Daoist. I, Chu's show, am just a simple Chu's show, and the Kunlun devil cult is also a simple Kunlun devil cult. How could there be any difference between the Daoist and the lower realm? Could it be that you all came to the lower realm just to go through the motions and have no intention of establishing your own sect? Although Chu's show's argument was sophistry, it was still quite reasonable. The Daoist sects had spent time and energy to come to the lower realm to establish their forces there. Whether it was for resources or for people, it was all for their own benefit. In this way, they must also have forces in both the Daoist and the lower realm, so what was the difference between them and the Kunlun devil cult? Perhaps the essential difference was Chu's show himself. However, the Brahma religion's religion master was obviously not interested in listening to Chu's show's sophistry. He looked at the Dao Venerable and said coldly, "You said before that the Daoist people should settle down before descending to the lower realm, and I listened to you. But now that we're in the lower realm, are you still going to stop me if I want to kill you?" The Dao Venerable did not speak. He had no enmity with Chu's show, nor did he have any karma with him. Therefore, he had no reason to harm Chu's show, but he also had no reason to save him. The Daoist people all turned to look at Chu's show. Everyone knew that Meng Xinghe had come to find trouble with him. At that time, Meng Xinghe was repelled by Chu's show's old barbarian king. However, the old barbarian king wasn't here this time. So, what could he, Chu's show, use to block? At this moment, Chu's show calmly took out an array plate and said lightly, "This array plate of mine is connected to High Heaven Sect's Spirit Cloud stage." Everyone present was stunned. So what if Chu's show's array discs are connected to the Divine Cloud realm? Even if you're connected to the Exalted Divine Palace, the Brahmin sect master will still kill you if he has to. However, the Dao Master, the World Exalt, and the Master of Fan Sect's expressions changed slightly. Chu's show sneered, "You've guessed it. You've all seen my Kunlun devil cult's rootless sacred flame. After taking over High Heaven Sect, the first thing I did was connect the rootless sacred flame spirit array to the Spirit Cloud realm. That's a genuine divine object of heaven and earth. It can definitely break the spirit array in the Spirit Cloud realm and release that existence. I destroyed the Vishnu temple and killed your Brahmin sect's people, but so what? If you want to kill me, then we'll all perish together. You've sealed that existence for 500 years. Guess who among you will be able to escape if he comes out? Chu Xiu had a malicious smile on his face, looking like he was saying, "Come on, let's fight." That despicable look made the Brahmin sect leader gnash his teeth in anger. Most of the people present were dumbfounded because they didn't know what that existence was. But the Brahmin sect master and the others knew. In fact, it was their ancestors who had sealed Dugu Weiwei, so they naturally knew how strong Dugu Weiwei was and what the consequences would be if he was released. Qin Baiyuan looked at Chu Xiu with a complicated expression. It turned out that this was the reason why Chu Xiu had been so active in setting up a spirit array in High Heaven Sect. Although Chu Xiu's actions were using High Heaven Sect, Qin Baiyuan didn't resent Chu Xiu. High Heaven Sect had fallen to the extent that it needed the protection of the Kunlun devil cult, so what right did it have to resent others? Qin Baiyuan just felt a little sad. High Heaven Sect clearly had such a powerful weapon in their hands, but they had never thought of using it for so many years. Why was that? Because of arrogance and conceit. In High Heaven Sect's view, they were already strong enough, so there was no need to threaten others in such an undignified way. As a result, when High Heaven Sect encountered a real crisis, they didn't use their trump card and instead used it by Chu Xiu to threaten a 9th Heavenly Layer Master. Moreover, this move was really effective. The evil side of the sect leader's face was still flickering with ferocious killing intent, but the good side of the sect leader's face was twitching and muttering something, as if he was trying to persuade himself. Finally, the Dao Master quickly said, "Forget it, we're all humans. The Daoist and the lower realms should be treated equally. Don't forget, we didn't come to the lower realms to resolve these grievances. Let's hurry up and find that thing." Hearing the Dao Master's words, the Brahmin sect's religion master turned his head and resisted the urge to continue attacking. But at this moment, in the lower realms, Lu Changlu looked at the Daoist crowd and called out hesitantly, "Ancestral Master?" Ning Xuanji was standing in the crowd, but let alone the cultivators from the lower realms, even Lu Changlu didn't recognize him for a while. After all, they were not people from 500 years ago. Although the portrait of Ning Xuanji had been passed down in the true martial arts sect, the Ning Xuanji in the portrait had a sage-like demeanor. He looked like a master who had achieved the Tao, not as sloppy as he was now. The other people in the lower realms all turned their eyes to Ning Xuanji, and the shock on their faces grew even stronger. It was even more intense than when they found out that Chu Xiu had already gone to the Daoist. Who else could Lu Changlu call ancestral master? Only the legendary existence, the immortal Ning Xuanji. But why did the Ning Xuanji in front of them seem different from the Ning Xuanji they had imagined? Ning Xuanji raised his eyebrows, walked out, and asked, "Are you a disciple of the true martial sect?" Lu Changlu nodded and bowed to Ning Xuanji. After bowing respectfully, he said, "This unfilial disciple, Lu Changlu, greets ancestral master. I'm now the 72nd sect master of the true martial sect." Ning Xuanji glanced at Lu Changlu and said calmly, "You're really unfilial. You're actually so weak. You're not even a martial immortal." Lu Changlu's face immediately turned red. If someone else said that, he would definitely spit on that person's face. Although he wasn't strong, even if he couldn't be ranked in the top 10 of the pugilistic world, he could still be in the top 20. Moreover, the true martial sect was the state religion of Eastern Qi, and he was also the state preceptor of Eastern Qi. However, the person who said that was his ancestral master, so he could only accept it. "Who's your master?" Ning Xuanji suddenly asked. Lu Changlu said, "My master is Sage Puxuan, Zhang Taixian." Ning Xuanji shook his head, "I've never heard of him." "Where's your master's master?" "Sage Qin Yun, Tao Gongdu." Ning Xuanji still shook his head, "I still haven't heard of him. He might not even be a direct disciple 500 years ago." "Forget it, it seems like my disciples and grand-disciples aren't very good. They didn't even leave behind their inheritance." Lu Changlu immediately said, "Ancestral master, now that you're back, I'll immediately give up the position of the sect leader. After you take over the true martial sect will definitely be stronger than 500 years ago." Ning Xuanji said calmly, "You can continue to be the sect leader. I won't get involved. My fate with the true martial sect will only last for one lifetime. The true martial sect is the true martial sect, but things have changed. It's no longer my true martial sect. Therefore, you can decide how the true martial sect will develop from now on. I won't interfere. However, this group of people will probably not destroy the real martial arts sect for my sake. Of course, you can also be arrogant and say some harsh words or something. However, if you're beaten, as long as you're not killed, I definitely won't bother. So, you guys can think about it yourself. Even in front of his own sect, Ning Xuanji had a nonchalant attitude. Moreover, he addressed himself as Old Dao. No matter how one looked at him, he didn't look like the legendary martial Dao immortal. Could Lu Changlu have mistaken him for someone else? In fact, Lu Changlu was also dumbfounded at this moment. He hoped that he was mistaken. Although he had heard the other elders of the true martial sect discussing Ning Xuanji's character, he only knew it when he saw Ning Xuanji today. Rumors really couldn't be trusted. Ning Xuanji's character was even worse than the rumors. Ning Xuanji retreated as if nothing had happened. At this moment, the Dao master shook his head gently and stood up to the martial artists in the lower realm. He said softly, "Everyone, don't be nervous. You and I were a family 10,000 years ago. This used to be our ancestral land." The Daoist martial artists came to the lower realm with the intention of communicating the two realms and spreading martial arts. At the same time, they also wanted to find what we had lost. We didn't come to kill, but to bring a flourishing age of martial arts, far surpassing the flourishing age of martial arts 10,000 years ago. Hearing the Dao master's words, the expressions of the martial artists in the lower realm eased a little. They weren't as nervous as before. They could see that the Dao master was definitely the strongest among the top Daoist martial artists. What he said was absolutely true. However, Chu Xiu sneered in his heart. He dared to say that even the Dao master himself didn't believe what he said. The lower realm wasn't the Daoist of the past. The martial artists in the lower realm weren't the barbarians in the upper realm. Moreover, with Ning Xuanji around, the Daoist martial artists wouldn't dare to kill wantonly. Moreover, it wasn't necessary. However, if the Daoist martial artists wanted to establish a force in the lower realm, there would definitely be conflicts. It was absolutely impossible to expect everyone to be good to each other. Just when the Dao master wanted to say something more, the space between the two groups of people suddenly distorted. It was as if the rules of space had been disturbed. In the end, the space was torn apart, and Zhong Shenxiu's figure strode out. Looking at the surrounding environment and people, Zhong Shenxiu muttered as if there was no one around, "The direction is correct this time, but it seems to be a little late." After speaking, Zhong Shenxiu looked at the Dao master and the others. He shook his head gently and said, "Although the cause and effect has been messed up, I know that this isn't a place you should come to." Chapter 1373. Chu Xiu didn't find it strange that Zhong Shenxiu would appear here. In any case, Zhong Shenxiu was used to appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Chu Xiu wouldn't find it strange if he suddenly appeared in the Daoist. However, Ning Xuanji was sizing up Zhong Shenxiu at this moment with a trace of doubt in his eyes. He seemed to be thinking about something. Zhong Shenxiu's sudden appearance made many of the Daoist cultivators frown. Because both sides came from the same source, and because of their relationship with Ning Xuanji, they could maintain a polite attitude towards the cultivators of the lower realms, even though it was only on the surface. Moreover, in the lower realms, whether it was to establish a sect or recruit disciples, they would need the cooperation of these lower realm sections. Therefore, even someone with a bad temper like the Brahma sect master didn't shout about killing them. However, as soon as Zhong Shenxiu appeared, he said that they shouldn't have come here. This made the Daoist cultivators a little dissatisfied. However, although they were dissatisfied, no one present said anything because they discovered that they couldn't see through Zhong Shenxiu's cultivation. They were peak 9th heavenly layer martial immortals, yet they couldn't see through the cultivation of the person in front of them. Could it be that he was also at the 9th heavenly layer? There were people in the lower realms who had also stepped into the ninth heavenly layer. Before the Daoist sovereign could react, the Brahma sect master's face began to distort. His evil side gained the upper hand. He grinned at Xianxia and said, "Shouldn't have come? In this world, there is no place that I can't come to. Whether we should have come or not is not up to you to judge." Previously, the Brahma sect master wanted to attack Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu threatened him with Dugu Weiwei. His mind wasn't stable to begin with. At this moment, he was suppressing his anger. But now, Xianxia's words ignited the anger in his heart. The Daoist sovereign frowned slightly. He wanted to tell the Brahma sect master not to be impulsive and to inquire about the other party's background. However, the Brahma sect master had already attacked. "If you want to stop us, you have to see how strong you are." As soon as the Brahma sect leader finished speaking, his face split into two extremes, and the energy around him also split into two. The world-extinguishing fire in his left hand transformed into a bow and arrow. Holding the bow with one hand, the arrow suddenly shot out. Everywhere it passed, all power was obliterated, including the laws and even space. This was no longer the Triple City Annihilation arrow that Chu Xiu was familiar with, but the true arrow of annihilation. In his right hand was a strangely shaped longsword that was curved and engraved with strange patterns. When the sword slashed down, everything in the world was divided into its initial power and returned to its origin. It actually involved a part of the power of the origin of creation. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly narrowed. Although the Brahmin sect leader had been acting crazily before this and didn't seem to be in his right mind, it was a fact that the Brahmin sect leader wasn't a normal person. However, the moment he made his move, Chu Xiu felt a sense of power. Two powerful martial arts that were close to the origin of power were easily grasped by him. One was annihilation, and the other was creation. His comprehension of the power of laws had most likely reached an extremely profound level. The truly terrifying thing about Ninth Heaven martial immortals was not their accumulation of power, but their comprehension of the laws. Both of them had grasped a law, but the other party's comprehension was deeper than yours. Perhaps with a single word from the other party, the laws that you controlled would immediately collapse. This was overwhelming power. When a peak Ninth Heaven powerhouse attacked, the power was like the heavens collapsing. But facing the world-extinguishing arrow, Xianxia only gently tapped his finger, and ripples appeared in the air. Like a calm lake being stirred, the world-extinguishing arrow actually began to distort. It was as if the power that could extinguish the laws of space itself was an existence of nothingness. As the ripples subsided, the world-extinguishing arrow disappeared, as if it had never existed. The eyes of the Dao ancestor, Meng Xinghe, and the others suddenly changed. This power was the power of the space laws that had been evolved to the extreme. The next moment, Xianxia casually grabbed at something. It seemed as if he had not grabbed anything, but everyone had a feeling that it was a sword. Xianxia grabbed a sword, and the world in his hand turned into a sword that stabbed at the sect leader of Fan sect. Using the heaven and earth as a sword, there was no sword will or sword chi. But even so, the cult master of Brahma sect let out a stifled grunt as he was sent flying by the powerful force in the void. In the face of the mighty might of the heaven and earth sword, no matter what kind of rules there were, it was useless. Mu Baishuang, who was behind him, had a look of horror on his face. What kind of sword technique was that? Even Luo Shan in the past could not reach the level of being able to turn the world into a sword with a casual grab. This existence from the lower realm had even surpassed the number one swordsman of the Daoist Luo Shan in terms of cultivation in the way of the sword. After the sect leader of Fan sect was sent flying, he did not stop. Instead, he formed a seal with both hands, and his body turned into 3 faces and 4 arms. The Brahma Dharma idol controlled creation. The Shiva Dharma idol controlled destruction. The Vishnu Dharma idol balanced the power of the two, separating life and death. 3 heads, 3 Dharma idols, but they seemed to form a world of their own. Everything in the surroundings began to twist and distort, and within a radius of several hundred zhang, all the rules and energies were forcefully controlled and twisted by these three forces. In this instant, it was as if this area had changed into another world, a world that belonged only to the Brahmin sect leader. In this world, he was a godlike existence. But before the sect leader of Fan sect could attack, the red mark on Zhong Xinxiu's forehead suddenly began to twist. The red mark was pushed open, revealing an eye. It was a scarlet vertical eye, without the slightest emotion. What was bred within it was a deathly stillness that made people despair. The moment everyone saw the vertical eye, their hearts palpitated. It was as if endless despair had seeped into their hearts. The scarlet vertical eye bloomed with a red light that pierced through the heavens and earth. Everywhere it passed, everything was torn apart. Even if it was a world in front of it, it was as fragile as tofu. Everything was torn apart as it headed straight for the sect leader of Fan sect. The sect leader of Fan sect roared angrily. His 4 arms formed a seal, and the power of the 3 gods of Fan sect merged into one. But this could only slightly slow down the speed of the red light, but it could not stop it from spreading. At this moment, the Tao Master suddenly formed a seal with his hand and lightly spat out a word, suppress. In an instant, heaven and earth attacked. Mysterious yellow chi condensed into a seal in front of the red light. Although it could not destroy it, it temporarily suppressed it. The Tao Master waved his horsetail whisk and pulled the sect leader of Fan sect back. He bowed to Zhong Xinxiu and said in a deep voice, "Benefactor, we mean no harm. But this is our ancestral land. Now that the seal has been broken, we are returning to our ancestral land." What is wrong with that? Seeing that the sect leader of Fan sect and the Tao Master no longer attacked, Zhong Xinxiu closed her third eye and said indifferently, "Your ancestral land has been abandoned and destroyed by you. This is the lower mortal realm, not your ancestral land." The Tao Master sighed and said, "As juniors, we cannot comment on the choice of our ancestors. But regardless of whether this is the lower mortal realm or the upper mortal realm, this place has the remains of our ancestors and the inheritances of our ancestors. So why can't it be our ancestral land? When we return to our ancestral land, what we bring is not slaughter, but martial arts inheritances and a flourishing age of martial arts. The 3 Pure Temple has opened a branch in the lower realm. Every month, there will be martial immortal experts giving lectures. All cultivators, regardless of Taoism, Buddhism or demons, sects or loose cultivators, can come and listen to the lectures." Meng Xinghe also said, "The Xinghe Martial Academy is the same. All cultivators in the lower realm can join the Xinghe Martial Academy. They can join and leave at any time. We will not stop them." When those words were said, the cultivators from the lower realm all widened their eyes. The impact of what happened today was too great. They had yet to completely digest it. But before, they must have come with a vigilant attitude towards the Daoist cultivators. But none of them expected the Daoist cultivators to be willing to give lectures and impart martial arts above the martial immortal realm in public. What difference was there from giving away secret manuals for free? Although the lower realm's essence was abundant, and the profound understanding of heaven and earth was not the peak, and the day of martial immortal was just around the corner, most of the cultivators did not have any experience in making the breakthrough to martial immortal. Only Yi Xiaonan, the old celestial master, and a few other extremely talented people could become martial immortals without any experience and before their essence erupted. And now, there were people willing to give away these things for free. What they had brought could truly be said to be a flourishing age of martial arts. However, Zhong Xinxiu shook her head and said, "I don't care why you have come or what you have brought. But, according to karma, you should not be here at this moment." The Tao Master frowned slightly and said indifferently, "Then, what is the karma that prevents us from appearing in the lower realm?" Karma, karma. Only when there is a cause can there be an effect. What is a cause? And what is an effect? Now that we have appeared here, is this karma still useful? This series of questions stunned Zhong Xinxiu. After a long while, she shook her head and said, "I don't know." This time, it was the Tao Master and the others who were stunned. The Brahmin sect's hierarch had a mental problem. Now, they felt that Zhong Xinxiu also had a mental problem. You were the one who said that the Daoist cultivators going to the lower realm was a violation of karma. In the end, you don't even know what karma is, and yet you are here to stop them? Looking at the shattered heavenly gate array, Wuxia Xianxia said, from the moment the array shattered, karma has changed. It has become different. I don't know what kind of karma you will cause, but if you insist on not returning to the Daoist, karma will become even more distorted, and the results of your fates will be different. The Dao Master pointed to the sky and said indifferently, we have cultivated our entire lives, and we have been fighting against the heavens. We believe in karma, but we don't believe in fate. If everything is destined from birth, why should we cultivate so hard and fight against the heavens and earth? Wuxia Xianxia sighed softly. This was the first time Chu Xiu had seen Wuxia Xianxia reveal a trace of emotion. In the past, no matter what, he was like a robot, not revealing any emotion. Take care of yourself. Leaving behind these words, Wuxia Xianxia flew directly towards the east. This time, he did not go in the wrong direction. Chapter 1374. Wuxia Xianxia's appearance not only confused the Daoist cultivators, but also the cultivators from the lower realms. Of course, what shocked them even more was Wuxia Xianxia's strength. They had never thought that the elusive Mahasvara celestial lord would be so terrifyingly powerful that even the exalted major powerhouses were no match for him. The warriors of the celestial absolute heaven might have looked down on the lower realms before this, but now, the celestial overarching celestial realm was in a state of disdain. After all, the number of cultivators from the lower realms who could become martial immortals could be counted on one's fingers. In terms of inheritance, they were the ones who had inherited all the inheritances of the ancient cultivators from 10,000 years ago. As for the cultivators from the lower realms, they had only inherited some bits and pieces. They didn't even have any divine abilities. But with Wuxia Xianxia's appearance, they discovered that the legendary ancestral land seemed to be very complicated. After returning to the ancestral land from the lower realms, Dao Master and the others discovered that the things they had envisioned before were useless. There were too many surprises. Dao Master said in a deep voice, everyone, it's time for us to go. Leave all the matters in the lower realms to the others in your respective sections. As he spoke, a few people walked out from their respective sections. They were all 9th or 8th heaven martial immortals, or newly advanced martial immortals like Su Guishan of the Three Pristine Temple with unlimited potential. There were about a dozen of them and they headed straight for the south. Mu Baishuang of the World Sword Sect obviously knew something. But he hesitated for a moment. Seeing Dao Master and the others leave, he didn't move. Chu Xiu raised his brows. It seemed like the supreme experts of exalted heaven had some sort of agreement with each other. They didn't return to the lower worlds just to fight for karmic luck, and it was as simple as establishing their own sects in the lower worlds. At that moment, Lu Changlu came over and wanted to talk to Ning Xuanji. After all, he was their ancestor. However, Ning Xuanji directly ignored him. He walked toward Chu Xiu and asked directly, Kid, you were the one who destroyed the heavenly gate. Is the Yang Extreme Source in the heavenly gate with you? Don't be nervous. I have no use for that thing. I won't snatch it from you. Of course, in other words, if I really want to rob you, what else can you do other than obediently accept it? Chu Xiu smiled awkwardly and said, if Senior Ning really wants it, I will definitely offer you the source of Yang. Ning Xuanji said with a faint smile, Kid, you're too cunning. If I really snatch it, will you release Dugu Weiwei? Forget it, I don't want to talk nonsense with you anymore. Kid, let's make a deal. Come with me to the East Sea, I want to borrow your Yang ability. Your current strength should be at the peak of the 4th celestial layer. After this is done, I have a way to raise you to the 5th celestial layer. How about it? Chu Xiu didn't even think before he said, I'll follow Senior's instructions. Not to mention that Ning Xuanji would not give him any benefits, Chu Xiu had no reason to refuse Ning Xuanji's strength. After all, it was a good opportunity to get close to a legendary powerhouse of this level. Although some of them were his disciples and grand disciples, they did not have this opportunity. For example, Lu Changlu. Looking at Ning Xuanji and Chu Xiu chatting happily and joking, Lu Changlu looked aggrieved. Which clan's patriarch was this? Most importantly, patriarch, do you know that the other party is the sect master of the Devil's Sect 500 years later? The pugilistic world has been around for a full 500 years. Immortal Ning Xuanji crushed Dugu Weiwei's ambition to dominate the pugilistic world, but now you're chatting so happily with the sect master of the Devil's Sect 500 years later. Your image has been shattered. Ning Xuanji didn't care about this. He directly pulled Chu Xiu and was about to leave. Chu Xiu hurriedly told Old Man Wei and the others to temporarily leave most of their forces in the lower realm and not to clash with those big sections. Ensuring their own territory and strength was the most important thing. After saying that, he was directly pulled away by Ning Xuanji. The Daoist experts and Chu Xiu both left, leaving the rest of the people staring at each other. Only then did they begin to retreat one after another, preparing to deal with the next situation. Chu Xiu's subordinates had to ensure that the interests of the Kunlun devil cult would not be damaged before Chu Xiu returned. The cultivators in the lower realm also had to ensure that while their interests were not damaged, they also had to obtain benefits, such as the cultivation experience of the martial immortal realm. As for what the celestial absolute heavens cultivators needed, only they themselves knew. Ning Xuanji pulled Chu Xiu toward the East Sea. On the way, Chu Xiu asked, "By the way, Senior, what are the Daoist people doing? Why are you pulling me to the East Sea?" Ning Xuanji narrowed his eyes and said, "Those guys went to the South Sea. They went to look for clues about the longevity heaven." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "It's been 10,000 years. They still haven't given up on the longevity heaven? Does the longevity heaven really exist?" Tianhun had already told Chu Xiu all the clues about the longevity heaven very clearly. The longevity heaven could only be opened by gathering the three origins. However, it seemed that the Wei Dao master and the others understood it was a little different from what Dugu Weiwei understood. Ning Xuanji sneered and said, "Who knows? It's all recorded in the ancient books. Anyway, I don't believe in those illusory things. I only believe in what's in front of me. I can comprehend the pinnacle of the laws, create the laws, and even create a world. Maybe in the future, I will become a god who can control a world." When Ning Xuanji said this, he should have sounded extremely heroic. However, when he said it, he sounded proud and smug, which ruined the atmosphere a little. Chu Xiu changed the topic and asked, "Senior, what are we looking for in the East Sea this time?" "We're looking for the fragments of the mortal world when it was first formed." Ning Xuanji didn't hide anything and explained it to Chu Xiu in detail. The current mortal world was formed after the upper mortal world was destroyed and merged with the lower mortal world. There must be a starting point for this fusion. When the two sides fuse and converge, some fragments of the world left behind by the collision will inevitably be born. That's what I'm looking for. Since I want to create a world, I must understand how that world was formed. According to my calculations, the laws of that place must be extremely chaotic, even more chaotic than the Daoist Divine Palace. That's why I called you here. When the time comes, I'll borrow the power of the Yang Extreme Source in your body to break through the chaotic laws and enter. Chu Xiu hesitated for a moment before saying, "It might not work if I just borrow the power of the Yang Extreme Source. I also have the Devil Dao Source in my body. The two have already merged and begun to circulate, so I can only use them at the same time." Chu Xiu couldn't hide the fact that he destroyed the Divine Gate, so the Daoist people would sooner or later know that he had the Yang Extreme Source in his body. Thus, this matter did not matter to him. In any case, he was currently using Dugu Weiwei to threaten everyone. For the sake of an essence that could not be used or refined, it was not worth it for those apex experts of the celestial absolute heaven to take such a risk. And now, Chu Xiu could confirm that Ning Xuanji had no need for the source, so he told him about the Yin and Yang source. Ning Xuanji looked at Chu Xiu with some surprise. "Kid, your luck is amazing. You even have the Yin and Yang source in your hands." "It doesn't matter, I just need to use the power of the source to break through the chaotic laws." Yin and yang are fine, but both are better. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly said, by the way, Senior Ning, what does luck represent? Are the Daoist forces also fighting for luck in the mortal world? Due to his strength, Chu Xiu actually didn't know much about the secrets of the peak. Most of the time, he was in a state of confusion. It just so happened that he was with Ning Xuanji now, and Ning Xuanji seemed to be in a good mood. If he could find out more information, he would ask as much as he could. Ning Xuanji said indifferently, luck isn't that important either. That's right, that Xiang Lv Fengxian beside you is a person blessed by luck. His innate luck is even longer than yours. He can be said to be the person with the strongest innate luck I've ever seen. Such a person's future will be much smoother. But this is just an individual's luck. If you want to occupy the entire world's luck, you have to stand at the true peak. In other words, when you really stand at the peak, luck is just icing on the cake, not providing timely help. As for what the Daoist guys are planning, I'm not too sure. They have their own plans. Then, Senior, are you going to fight for the luck of the mortal world? Ning Xuanji sneered, those are all leftovers from me. 500 years ago, I shared the luck of the mortal world with Dugu Weiwei, but so what? I still haven't taken that last step. Luck only lasts for one lifetime. I've taken the luck of 500 years ago. Even if I want to fight for the luck of this era, I won't have a share. Chu Xiu fell silent. To put it nicely, Ning Xuanji had seen through the essence of luck. To put it bluntly, he was just showing off. So what if you share the luck of the mortal world? You've already become one of the 2 strongest cultivators in the mortal world. Even if you go to the Daoist, you won't have a match in a one-on-one fight. What else do you want? Of course, Chu Xiu didn't dare to say it out loud. He just muttered in his heart. After arriving at the shore of the East Sea, Ning Xuanji suddenly stopped. Chu Xiu looked at Ning Xuanji in confusion, not knowing what he meant. Ning Xuanji pointed ahead and said, Kid, I'll leave it to you. Chu Xiu was stunned, what do you mean? Of course I'm looking for the starting ground of the 2 worlds. Chu Xiu asked in surprise, you don't know the location of that place? Ning Xuanji said matter-of-factly, calculation isn't prophecy. I can only deduce the initial location of the fusion of the 2 worlds. But the East Sea is so big, how can I accurately find that place? You're the master of the Kunlun devil cult in the mortal world. Don't tell me that you don't have any power overseas. Dugu Weiwei didn't even make a move back then. He only sent a demon sovereign and the entire martial world overseas was subdued. Kid, don't tell me that you haven't even recovered the land overseas? Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, I've recovered it. Senior Ning, don't worry. Leave it to me. Chapter 1375. Actually, even Chu Xiu wasn't sure if Chu Xiu had any influence overseas. However, he did have some acquaintances overseas. In the past, Chu Xiu had personally eradicated the 5th Lord Hua of Supreme Island in order for the overseas martial arts world to attack Eastern Qi. He had helped the Tainishui Hall Pavilion Master Pak Donglai and the Stormy Waves Alliance Master Ko Shintong to the throne. Later, it was said that they had established a force called the Eastern Sea Alliance and became the ruler of the overseas martial arts world. Although they hadn't officially joined the Kunlun devil cult, it wasn't hard to get them to take action based on their old friendship. At this time, on Supreme Island in the Eastern Sea, Pak Donglai, Ko Shintong, and the others were leading the Eastern Sea Alliance's martial artists to confront a group of martial artists opposite them. Pak Donglai said coldly, Huaingqi, I advised you to join the Eastern Sea Alliance, but you didn't. Now, you're leading people to break the Eastern Sea Alliance's rules. Do you really want to destroy the peace in the Eastern Sea? Huaingqi was a handsome young man in his 30s. He said indifferently, join the Eastern Sea Alliance? If you give me the position of the Alliance Master, I'll join. But will you, Alliance Master Bai? Supreme Island was originally my Hua family's territory. I let the Eastern Sea Alliance occupy it for so long. Is it too much for me to take it back now? Pak Donglai shouted angrily, Bullsh *t. What kind of member of the Hua family are you? You're just an illegitimate child who doesn't even acknowledge the Hua family, and now you're talking about the Hua family? When Supreme Island was destroyed, the fifth Lord Hua's bloodline was completely eradicated. Hua Yingxi was actually just an illegitimate child of the Hua family. Initially, he had not been punished. Later, because of a series of fortuitous encounters, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Moreover, because he had some tricks up his sleeve, he had managed to recruit a group of old subordinates of the fifth Lord Hua to rise in the East Sea. In the past 2 years, they had even developed to the point where they could rival the East Sea Alliance. Hua Yingxi snorted coldly. So what if he's an illegitimate child? My surname is Hua too. Back then, you colluded with outsiders to destroy my Hua family. I have yet to settle this score with you. If your East Sea Alliance gives up Sovereign Island, I'll let bygones be bygones. What if we don't? Pak Donglai said coldly. Hua Yingxi sneered, you won't? The few islands at the core of your Eastern Sea Alliance will change owners in the next moment. Back then, you took in so many people from my Hua family. Do you know how many of them were my people? Pak Donglai's expression changed. Back then, when the East Sea Alliance eradicated the Hua family, they did not really wipe them out. They took in some people who were not from the Hua family's direct line of descent. To them, since the fifth Lord Hua was already dead, those people were naturally not a big deal. But who would have thought that those people would become the loopholes today? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Everyone, are you having a meeting? Chu Xiao and Ning Xuanji descended from mid-air and landed between the two groups of people just like that. Seeing Chu Xiao, Pak Donglai was overjoyed. He quickly shouted, Cult Master Chu. Hua Yingxi's expression changed immediately. He vaguely guessed who the other party was, but he did not give up and asked, May I know who you are, sir? Chu Xiao calmly said, I'm the outsider that Pak Donglai and the others are colluding with. They were already old acquaintances. Pak Donglai quickly said, Cult Master Chu, you have to help us. Although the news overseas was not as well informed, they still knew about Chu Xiao destroying the Divine Gate. Now, Chu Xiao was vaguely the top person in the world. If Chu Xiao was willing to help, the trouble of the Eastern Sea Alliance could be solved immediately. Hua Yingxi was no idiot. How could he not have heard of Chu Xiao? Although he had been a little disrespectful to Chu Xiao, he immediately bowed to Chu Xiao and said respectfully, I was rash just now. Please forgive me, Cult Master Chu. When Cult Master Chu killed Hua Xingzuan, it was because Hua Xingzuan deserved to die. Although my surname is also Hua, I have nothing to do with Hua Xingzuan. In fact, I even wanted to kill those Hua family members who bullied and humiliated me back then. My dispute with the Eastern Sea Alliance is just a dispute in the pugilistic world. I have no intention of involving Cult Master Chu. As far as I know, the Eastern Sea Alliance is not a force under Cult Master Chu's command. I have admired Cult Master Chu for a long time. Today, I have the opportunity to join Cult Master Chu and become a lackey under Cult Master Chu. I will guard the maritime border for the Kunlun Devil cult and will never betray it. I hope Cult Master will take me in. Bai Donglai was stunned when he heard this. He had never expected that Hua Yingxi, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, would change his attitude so quickly. It was like flipping a page of a book. Chu Xiao, on the other hand, looked at Hua Yingxi with a faint smile. What a talent. He had heard what Hua Yingxi said clearly just now. In such a short time, Hua Yingxi had turned hostile and made the most suitable choice. Putting his attitude to the lowest level was not something an ordinary person could do. For example, Pak Donglai was like this. After a while, he reacted and quickly said, Cult Master Chu. I'm also willing to join the Kunlun Devil cult. Chu Xiao replied calmly, since when did the Kunlun Devil cult become so popular that everyone wants to join? If they really wanted to join, why would they wait until now? Before Pak Donglai and Huoyingqi could say anything, Chu Xiu said, I'm not here to meddle in the affairs of the overseas martial arts world. I'm here to find a place. As he spoke, Chu Xiu threw out a piece of paper. On it were some pictures that Ning Xuanji had deduced, as well as some characteristics of the place where the upper and lower heavens merged. It's not difficult to join the Kunlun Devil cult. Aren't you guys fighting for the Supreme Island? I'm not siding with anyone. You guys can split the Supreme Island in half first. Once it's done, whoever helps me find the place first will get the other half. Just as Chu Xiu finished speaking, Chu Xiu cast the law embodiment of heaven and earth. He instantly transformed into a giant that was thousands of meters tall. Turning his palm into a saber, Chu Xiu's palm descended. Powerful energy was constantly poured into it, and instantly, a fissure over 10 miles long appeared on the ground. As if an earth dragon was turning over, the ground shook continuously. As the law embodiment of heaven and earth's energy was injected into it, the entire Supreme Island was split into two. There was a distance of dozens of meters between them. Everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at Chu Xiu as if they were looking at a god. Clearly, they couldn't understand the power of a martial immortal at their cultivation level. Furthermore, not even ordinary martial immortals were capable of splitting the Paragon Island in half. Only Chu Xiu, who had the law embodiment of heaven and earth, could do it. After being dumbfounded, the people from both sides didn't waste any time. They immediately led their subordinates to search for the place Chu Xiu was looking for. Ning Xuanji had been concealing his aura and watching Chu Xiu's performance. After everyone left, he pouted and said, You're quite cunning. Ning Xuanji was a sect leader 500 years ago. After living for so long, what had he not seen? Chu Xiu's little trick couldn't fool him. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, he could totally ask one party to help him search for the place. However, Chu Xiu didn't care about his friendship with Pak Donglai, nor did he care about Huoyingqi's flattery. Instead, he displayed his powerful strength and split the Supreme Island. He wanted them to compete with each other without caring about anything else. If one party searched for the place, it might be more difficult. However, if two parties searched together, they would become competitors and risk their lives to search for the place. Chu Xiu smiled and said, It's just a little trick. However, it can greatly increase the efficiency. Chu Xiu was right. What he did indeed greatly increase the efficiency. In order to curry favor with Chu Xiu, both parties used almost all their subordinates to search the entire East Sea. In the end, they only used half a month to find out where the place was. Moreover, they found it at almost the same time. The place was a strange secret realm with folded spaces. It was deep in the storm-ravaged Wind Sea. Everyone who entered it would be transported out for no reason. Therefore, no one went there anymore. The East Sea had yet to be developed. There were all sorts of secret realms and dangerous places. Therefore, they didn't pay too much attention to it. There were no benefits to be gained from it, so it was forgotten. After the two brought Chu Xiu and Ning Xuanji to the place, they looked at Chu Xiu eagerly, hoping that Chu Xiu could give them an answer. However, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said half-heartedly, Go back first. I'll tell you about the Supreme Island later. After sending the two away, Chu Xiu looked ahead and said, Senior Ning, is this the place? An extremely strange scene appeared in front of Chu Xiu. It was a sea filled with reefs. At first glance, it didn't look different. However, if one looked closely, they would realize that this strange place seemed to be filled with countless mirrors. Many of the sceneries were mirrored. The waves from both sides hit the center at the same time and dissipated in the end. Ning Xuanji counted with his fingers and nodded, It should be here. Kid, activate the yin and yang source in your body. Chu Xiu hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior, the yin and yang source isn't something a human can control. It might be a little dangerous for me to activate it now. Ning Xuanji said impatiently, I know. With me here, how can I watch something happen to you? Hearing Ning Xuanji's words, Chu Xiu clenched his teeth and activated the yin and yang source in his body with the power of creation. In an instant, the two powerful forces surged out of Chu Xiu's body and dyed his body yin and yang. At that moment, Ning Xuanji slapped Chu Xiu hard. The power of rules seeped into Chu Xiu's body. It seemed to have built a channel and the source energy poured out. The strange secret realm in front of him was torn apart by the source energy. What appeared in front of Chu Xiu was an even more mysterious scene. Space was stacked here. A complete world merged with a broken world. It was as if a ball was covering another ball, but the patterns on the two balls overlapped and merged into one. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly widened. Because he saw a figure that definitely shouldn't be here. White clothes and bare feet. There was a red mark on his forehead. It was the figure left behind by Zhong Xianxia. Chapter 1376. The strange area that Ning Xuanji had opened was the starting point for the fusion of the upper mortal world and the lower mortal world. The laws of space and time had no effect here. Therefore, the images of those who had been here would be left behind and would never disappear. This situation had appeared in many places where the space laws were distorted. It was an abnormal phenomenon. But the key problem was that Zhong Xianxia's figure was imprinted in the deepest part of the upper mortal world and the lower mortal world. It was 10,000 years ago. What did this mean? It meant that after the great ancient calamity, those powerhouses had left the upper mortal world. But Zhong Xianxia was here, like a bystander, watching the fusion of the two worlds. He had lived for 10,000 years. Or even longer. Zhong Xianxia was a mystery to begin with. His origin was a mystery, his identity was also a mystery, and his strength was even more unfathomable. Previously, Chu Xiu thought that he was just a martial immortal. But in the end, he could fight against the sect master and Dao Lord of the Nine Heavens. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that he was here 10,000 years ago. Ning Xuanji could live for 500 years because of his strength. But if Zhong Xianxia really lived for 10,000 years, what was the difference between this and the legendary longevity? Ning Xuanji naturally saw this scene as well. He frowned. Obviously, he couldn't figure it out. Chu Xiu asked, "Senior Ning, 500 years ago, have you heard of Zhong Xianxia of the Sky of Freedom?" Ning Xuanji frowned and said, "I have vaguely heard of Sky of Freedom, but I have never seen Zhong Xianxia, nor have I heard of this name. At that time, I thought that Sky of Freedom was just a secluded cultivation force overseas. I only knew that they were strong, but I didn't pay much attention to them. Including when Zhong Xianxia made his move, I also thought that he was just a new powerhouse that appeared in the pugilistic world in the past 500 years. After all, the lower realm already had Dugu Weiwei and me. It's not a big deal for another to appear in 500 years. But now, I remember that I actually met Zhong Xianxia before, 500 years ago. Of course not, if I had seen him 500 years ago, how could I forget him? More accurately, what I've seen should be a statue of him. When I was young, I found a statue in the ruins of a sect that had existed for thousands of years. That statue was of Zhong Xianxia. Back then, I didn't pay much attention to it. I thought it was an ancestor of some sect. That's why I didn't remember that the statue was Zhong Xianxia until now." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Did that mean that Zhong Xianxia had already existed thousands of years ago? But thinking about it, it was normal. He knew Zhong Xianxia's habits. This person often got lost and always talked about karma. He never owed anyone karma. Even if he asked for directions, he would give the other party benefits to offset the karma. Perhaps in Zhong Xianxia's eyes, the benefits he had given him were only worth the price of asking for directions. But for those who had benefited from it, it was a great fortune, a great fortune. Therefore, it was normal for people to build a statue to commemorate Zhong Xianxia. At this time, Ning Xuanji had a faint smile on his face as he muttered, "Interesting, interesting. It's been a long time since I've encountered such an interesting thing. 500 years ago, Ning Xuanji thought that he had explored the entire lower realm. He didn't expect that after 500 years, there would be such an interesting thing happening in the lower realm. Looking at the wonderful scene of the two worlds merging in front of him, Ning Xuanji waved his hand and said, "All right, you can go do what you need to do now. Of course, you can stay here and take a look, but your realm isn't there yet. You're not on this path, so it's useless to watch." Chu Xiu nodded. The Daoist had just come to the lower realm. There were indeed many things waiting for him to deal with. However, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He looked at Ning Xuanji and didn't move. Ning Xuanji was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He sneered and said, "Kid, I'm a man of my word. How can I owe you a promise? Look at yourself, which heavenly layer are you at now?" Only then did Chu Xiu realize that he was already at the 5th heavenly layer. Actually, when Chu Xiu activated the yin and yang source, although Ning Xuanji had already guided most of the source out, there was still a part of it left in Chu Xiu's body. That part of the energy was just right. Ning Xuanji's control was extremely precise, just enough for him to break through the bottleneck of the 5th heavenly layer. However, as soon as he opened the door of that place, Chu Xiu saw Zhongxinxiu and was shocked. Therefore, he couldn't react to the changes in his body for a moment. Chu Xiu didn't feel embarrassed at all. He cupped his hands at Ning Xuanji and said, "Since that's the case, Senior can cultivate here. I'll take my leave first." After returning to Supreme Island, Pak Donglai and Huo Yingqi were still confronting each other. At the same time, they were also waiting for Chu Xiu. After seeing Chu Xiu, the two of them wanted a result. They wanted Chu Xiu to support them. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "The two of you just can't get over it. What's the point of fighting in such a small place like the East Sea? Now that the new era is coming, the vitality of the entire pugilistic world has risen a lot. Maybe it's not obvious because you're in the East Sea, but the Central Plains warriors have already changed. Both of you want to join my Kunlun devil cult, and I welcome both of you. There's no conflict. Later, I'll send someone to the East Sea to teach you some cultivation techniques and other things. You can also choose your own elite disciples to come to the Central Plains warriors to cultivate. Take a long-term view. Your future isn't just limited to these things in front of you." Pak Donglai and Huo Yingqi looked at each other. Although they still didn't see eye to eye with each other, since Chu Xiu had already said so, they could only cup their hands and said, "Yes, we will follow the cult master's orders." The overseas pugilistic world's forces were still all right in the past. But that was in the past. Now, any random sect of the Central Plains warriors might be stronger than overseas. However, no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Since they were fighting for Providence, they couldn't give up overseas. Although there weren't many people in this place, there were still some of them. Before anyone noticed, it was best to take them under his command first. As for the Central Plains warriors, during the time when Chu Xiu and Ning Xuanji went overseas, the Daoist cultivators who descended to the lower realm could be said to have set off a huge wave, making the entire pugilistic world a mess. Although the Dao Master and the other powerhouses went to the South Sea to look for clues about the longevity heaven, the disciples they left behind followed their instructions and established sects in the lower realm. Among them, the Sanskrit sect and the Tianluo temple chose to settle in eastern Qi, while the Three Pure Palace chose to settle in West Chu. In fact, the atmosphere of the Dao sect in eastern Qi was the heaviest. However, the Dao Master might have some scruples about Ning Xuanji, so before he left, he ordered the Dao sect to settle in West Chu. The Star River Martial Arts Academy also settled in eastern Qi, while the World Sword sect chose West Chu. There were also many cultivators from Gu Zun's lineage and the second-class sects who settled in the pugilistic world. They mainly chose West Chu and Northern Yen. Eastern Qi belonged to the Central Plains, so there were too many forces in the pugilistic world. Settling in Eastern Qi was bound to cause a huge conflict. The Daoist cultivators had just descended to the lower realm. Even if they were powerful, they were not willing to fight at this time. Therefore, most of them chose the vast and sparsely populated Northern Yen and West Chu. At this time, in the Northern Yan Palace, the Northern Yan Emperor, Xiangli, was smashing the table in anger. Bastard! How dare you! How dare they bully me like this? My temporary imperial residence has to give up land for their sections. Do they still have any respect for the Northern Yan royal family? All these years, Xiangli had lived a comfortable life. The West Chu imperial court was naturally weak, so there was no need to mention it. Over in eastern Qi, Lv Haochang was old and muddle-headed. He stubbornly held on and refused to die. He also refused to abdicate. If he didn't die, his sons probably wouldn't be able to resist killing him. There was no external threat. Within the Northern Yan, although there were some rising forces in the Northern Yan martial arts world, they did not dare to act presumptuously because of the Kunlun devil cult suppression. Therefore, this period of time had been the most stable and prosperous for the Northern Yan. Not long ago, a rising force in Northern Yan, the Vajra sect, one of the 8 sects, had occupied the temporary imperial residence that Xiangli had wanted to build for himself. They had even seriously injured the head of the imperial court. This was practically a provocation to the Northern Yan imperial court. Other than Xiangli, the Northern Yan's protector general Xiang Wu and Xiang Chong, who was in charge of the imperial consecration hall, were also in the main hall. Xiang Chong said in a low voice, "I'm afraid they really don't care about the Northern Yan imperial family." The Vajra sect's headmaster, Laughing Vajra, Song Wan, is a character. He had accidentally obtained the Vajra's Angry Vajra Heart Sutra from the Vajra department of the Great Light Temple. He has cultivated it to a level even stronger than the previous Vajra department's first seat. When the Yuan Qi in the Jianghu skyrocketed, he used this opportunity to enter the heaven and earth mystic state. Although this person cultivates the Vajra's Angry Eyes Heart Sutra, he is able to perfectly suppress the anger in his heart. He is even extremely slippery, always smiling whenever he sees someone. That's why he's called the Smiling Vajra. Regardless of whether he's facing the other sects of Northern Yan or the Northern Yan royal family, he's always extremely respectful and polite. Xiang Wu nibbled on a banana as he said, "That's right. That old man is quite a good person. He even gave me a cart full of bananas before. Why is he so full of himself now? Did he eat too many bananas?" Xiang Chong said lightly, "Full of himself?" Song Wan has always been the kind of person who bullies the weak and fears the strong. Now that he dares to challenge the Northern Yan imperial court, he must have found a new backer. How powerful is his backer? Even more powerful than the Northern Yan imperial court? Xiang Chong said in a low voice, "Is a martial immortal powerful enough?" The Daoist Prime Lord's 4th Heaven Martial Immortal, Crimson Afterglow Venerable, Lu Tianyuan, has already established the Crimson Afterglow Divine sect in the Northern Yan. Song Wan was the first to seek refuge and was taken in as a disciple. He was taught martial arts and fully responsible for the establishment of the Crimson Afterglow Divine sect. He seized His Majesty's residence not for the Vajra sect, but to establish the Crimson Afterglow Divine sect. After all, that land is one of the rare treasured lands of the Northern Yan. Chapter 1377. For the martialists of the lower realms, the main impact that the Daoist celestial martialists brought to the lower realms was the impact of their power. The strength of a martial immortal was terrifying. Not counting the people of the Kunlun devil cult, there were only 4 people in the lower realm who had reached this realm. Although there was a wave of vitality, for most people, it was only from the early stage of the Elysium opening stage to the peak, and from the true fire spirit cultivation stage to the Elysium opening stage. Martial immortal was still an unattainable realm. Hearing that the other side was backed by the Daoist martial artists, Xiangli also lost his temper. He dejectedly sat back on the dragon throne and unwillingly asked, "Could it be that we have no choice but to swallow this anger?" Xiang Wu swallowed the last banana and collapsed on the chair. "Your Majesty, it's time to change your way of thinking. The 3 countries no longer have the power to maintain the stability of the world. A martial immortal can crush mountains and break seas. He can fight against thousands of soldiers and horses. We are not qualified to compete with him. We, the Northern Yen, also have a backer. In other words, the Northern Yen is the territory of the great cult master Chu. If we are bullied, will the cult master Chu not show up? We can't do anything about this matter. Let's go to the Kunlun devil cult. Xiangli frowned slightly, but I heard that the people of the Kunlun devil cult are not in the Northern Yen now. Before Chu Xiu left, he ordered Wei Shuya and the others to guard the territory of the Kunlun devil cult. Therefore, the Kunlun devil cult valued the southern region the most. After all, it was a place where the space of the two worlds overlapped. Although the two worlds were now connected and people could go to the lower realm at any time, they needed a heavenly key and could only be used by elite disciples. Only the overlapping space of Chu Xiu could allow the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult to freely travel between the two worlds. Xiang Wu spread his hands and said, "Then let's go find Shen Feiying of the Giant Spirit Gang and Bai Wuji of the Floating Snow City of the Extreme North. They are all vassals of the Kunlun devil cult and are no different from true disciples." Xiangli thought about it and said, "All right then, I'll leave this matter to you." "Me?" Xiang Wu was taken aback. He was the one who came up with the idea. How did he become the errand boy? Xiangli said matter-of-factly, "You were the one who came up with the idea, so of course, you should be the one to do it. Besides, this is such a big matter, the Northern Yen court should send someone capable to handle it." Xiang Wu felt a little stifled. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have said so much. However, since His Majesty had given the order, he had no choice but to go to Shen Feiying and Bai Wuji to talk about it. These two sects had been developing in the Northern Yen region for a long time, so they were quite familiar with Xiang Wu. Hearing Xiang Wu's words, the two looked at each other, and after a brief discussion through voice transmission, they decided to go with Xiang Wu. Both of them were now vassal sects of the Kunlun devil cult. Of course, in the eyes of other Northern Yen martial artists, they were the number one lackeys. But it didn't matter whether they were lackeys or not. In any case, they were only loyal to the Kunlun devil cult. If Vajra Sect Song-won had gone to provoke the Northern Yen court alone, they wouldn't have bothered to deal with him. But Song-won's first move to side with the Daoist Prime sovereigns had already made them a little unhappy. Now, Song-won was acting so domineering. Had he really forgotten who was in charge of the Northern Yen region? Therefore, they were not only going to help the Northern Yen court, but also to use the identity of the Kunlun devil cult to teach Song-won a lesson. In a place more than 15 kilometers away from the capital city of Yanjing, there was a large construction going on in this place to establish a sect. This was the place where Xiang Long was going to build his temporary imperial residence. Although Xiangli wasn't a fatuous ruler, he wasn't the diligent type. He still had to enjoy himself. In the end, the temporary imperial residence was just about to be built when the place was taken away. One could imagine how sullen Xiangli was. At this time, Song-won was personally supervising the construction at the construction site. He was personally supervising the construction as the Vajra sect's master and an ethereal enlightenment realm expert. One could imagine how much effort he put into the construction of the Crimson Afterglow Divine Sect. Song-won was a tall and burly middle-aged martial artist. He should have had a very fierce appearance, but he always wore a smile on his face and gave off a very kind feeling. Speaking of which, Song-won's rise was related to Chu Xiu. Previously, Song-won was just an ordinary unaffiliated martial artist in the Northern Yen. His strength wasn't strong and could only be said to be a so-so. He had some reputation, but he couldn't be considered a big shot. But later, when Chu Xiu destroyed the Great Light Temple, Song-won and some other nosy martial artists went to the ruins of the Great Light Temple to investigate. It should have been a ruin, but Song-won accidentally found the Vajra institution's Furious Eyes Vajra Heart Sutra and some elixirs. This cultivation method was unexpectedly compatible with Song-won. He, who had never cultivated a Buddhist cultivation method, relied on the Furious Eyes Vajra Heart Sutra and the elixirs to improve his cultivation by leaps and bounds. He reached the true fire spirit refinement realm and established the Vajra sect, becoming one of the 8 sections. Later, when Chu Xiu attacked the Gate of Heaven, Song Wan was also one of the participants in the Northern Yen. He broke the gate of heaven and earth at the first opportunity and felt the wave of spiritual energy. Finally, not long ago, he stepped into the ethereal enlightenment realm. In this life, Song Wan was most proud not of his strength, but his foresight. Over the years, he had experienced all kinds of things in Jianghu, big and small. But every time, he was able to seize the right opportunity to benefit himself and improve his strength by leaps and bounds. This time, the Daoist martial artists descended to the lower world. This was an opportunity given to Song Wan by the heavens. That was the legendary martial immortal. Other than the Kunlun demon cult, only Yi Shaonan and the other three had reached this realm in the lower realm. Therefore, he chose to rely on them at the first moment, and put in all his effort to help them plan the establishment of a sect. Finally, they relented and accepted him as their disciple. That Gu Zun also had a disciple before, but since he had decided to establish a sect in the lower world, it was impossible for him to have only one disciple. Although Song Wan was a little old, at least he had strength and was obedient. This was not easy for a Gu Zun who was establishing a sect for the first time. At this moment, a disciple suddenly came to report, "Sect Master, Bai Wuji of the northern fluttering snow city and Shenfeiying of the giant spirit gang have arrived." The smile on Song Wan's face suddenly turned into a sneer. He knew what they were here for. They must have been invited by the Northern Yen court. Previously, Song Wan didn't have much of an opinion about the Kunlun demon sect. Even though he cultivated in the Buddhist sect's cultivation technique, he still yearned for the Kunlun demon sect. He hoped to be like Shenfeiying and Bai Wuji, becoming a vassal sect of the Kunlun demon sect. But what happened in the end? He rushed to recommend himself to Mei Qinglian, who was in charge of the Northern Yen land. It was because he was impressed by Mei Qinglian's beauty that he took a few more glances at her. Because he wanted to show off his Vajra sect strength, he belittled the fluttering snow city and the giant spirit gang. That B***TCH chased him out. Ever since then, Song Wan had always harbored a trace of resentment towards the Kunlun demon sect. However, Song Wan was a man of great forbearance. Even when Mei Qinglian came to the Northern Yen land again and called on the Northern Yen martial artists to attack the Divine Gate, he did not do anything. He knew that no one in the pugilistic world could stop the Kunlun devil cult at that time. But now, things were different. The Kunlun devil cult was no longer the only sect in the world of Daoist martial artists. Song Wan was not among those who went to the Divine Gate to wait for the arrival of the martial artists from the upper world. He was not qualified to do so. But he did buy some information about martial immortals and Gu Zun from Wind's Sweeping Tower. He learned about Gu Zun's position in the Daoist world and that there were 9 levels of martial immortals. The Reverend Qi Xia, whom he was close to, was a martial immortal at the 5th level. As for Chu Xiu, he heard that he was a newly ascended martial immortal and should be between the 2nd and 3rd level. There was not much information about Chu Xiu in the Daoist world. Since Chu Xiu did not say anything, the Daoist martial artists did not bother to say anything. Only those who went to the Divine Gate had some guesses. Judging from the attitude of the Daoist martial artists, it seemed that Chu Xiu had a high position in the Daoist world. Of course, Song Wan did not know this. From what he knew, a 5th level was definitely stronger than a 2nd or 3rd level. Therefore, he, who had always been cautious, did so even though he knew that his action would offend the Northern Yen court and even the Kunlun devil cult. Since he had found someone to rely on, he must cling to him. He could not afford to be half-hearted. With that thought, Song Wan said calmly, "Go, invite him in." Shenfeiying and Bai Wuji walked in side by side. When Shenfeiying saw Song Wan, he said loudly, "Fatty Song, you're really something. You even dare to touch the Northern Yen court's land. What, do you want to be the emperor of this Northern Yen land?" Shenfeiying's talent was limited. Under the wave of primordial qi, he had barely reached the true fire spirit refinement realm. But facing Song Wan, who was stronger than him, Shenfeiying had nothing to fear. This fatty had flattered him many times before, and his attitude was very humble. A smile appeared on Song Wan's face. However, it was not the flattering smile that Bai Wuji was familiar with. Instead, it was a cold smile. He suddenly slapped Shen Feiying's face. A powerful glowing aura smashed down, and Shen Feiying was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. Bai Wuji did not even have time to react. Is Fatty Song someone you can call? Is that something you have the right to do? Ridiculous. Bai Wuji helped Shen Feiying up, pointed at Song Wan and shouted, Song Wan. What is the meaning of this? Song Wan said calmly, I'm just teaching this disrespectful guy a lesson. How can a true fire spirit refinement realm warrior be so confident? Bai Wuji and Shen Feiying had a lot of things to say to Song Wan, but now it seemed that they were useless. From the other party's attitude, they could see what he meant. Bai Wuji narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Song Wan, do you really want to be an enemy of the Kunlun devil cult? Song Wan snorted coldly, I didn't. Don't slander me. I was just teaching Shen Feiying how to respect his superiors. If I take someone like him out, I'm afraid that even the cult master Chu would look down on him. Bai Wuji said coldly, Good. Song Wan, you have guts. After saying that, Bai Wuji directly dragged the seriously injured Shen Feiying and left. Song Wan's subordinate said with some worry, Sect Master, that Shen Feiying is the #1 lackey of the Kunlun devil cult after all. You hit a dog under Chu's show, will you be okay? Song Wan sneered and pointed above his head, what are you afraid of? There are people above me now. Chapter 1378. Inside the Kunlun devil cult's southern temple. Shen Feiying's face was pale, but he was crying miserably. Sirs, you must uphold justice for me. I haven't even said a word, and that Song Wan slapped me. How arrogant is he? How arrogant. I know they all say that I'm a dog under Cult Master Chu, but what's wrong with being a dog? I'm a lackey under Cult Master Chu, and I've never been wronged like this. You have to look at the master before you beat a dog. Song Wan slapped me, which means he didn't give Cult Master Chu any face. He's slapping the Saint Cult's face. Most of the Kunlun devil cult's forces were now in the southern temple. Wei Shia, Mei Qinglian, and the others looked at Shen Feiying, who was crying out his grievances and felt a headache coming on. Shen Feiying was loyal, but he was becoming more and more shameless. They dared to guarantee that Shen Feiying's words were definitely exaggerated, and he was exaggerating the matter. Mei Qinglian glanced at Bai Wuji and said, Bai Wuji, tell me what's going on. Bai Wuji was a warrior on the Longhu list in the same era as Chu Xiu. At first, they were enemies, but later they became his subordinates. After so many years, Bai Wuji had lost a lot of his youthful arrogance and had become much calmer. Hearing this, Bai Wuji said in a deep voice, although Master Shen exaggerated a little, things are really similar to what he said. Song Wan's attitude is extremely tough. It's clear that he doesn't take us seriously. Maybe in his opinion, he can ignore the Kunlun devil cult if he has the support of Venerable Qixia. Mei Qinglian turned to Wei Shia and asked, Elder Wei, what's the background of Venerable Qixia? Wei Shia was experienced and prudent. Since Chu Xiu and Meng Xinghe became enemies, Wei Shia had specially asked Sikong Tan for information on Gu Zun. Meng Xinghe was now the leader of Gu Zun's faction. Although he did not show any intention of using this identity to suppress Chu Xiu, he still had to be on guard. Wei Shia shook his head. He doesn't have much of a background, just an ordinary prime sovereign. He had spent his entire life cultivating in peace, never stirring up any disputes among the Daoist people. He was the type of prime sovereign who cultivated arduously. However, it seemed that he had been training hard for a long time, so he was unwilling to continue. He was already tempted when Meng Xinghe announced that Gu Zun could establish a sect in the lower realm at will. Mei Qinglian frowned and said, this kind of talent is the most troublesome. Now that cult master is not here, what can we do? Mobilize all of them to fight against the enemy? We can defeat them, but I'm afraid that something will happen to the southern barbarians. The Kunlun devil cult wasn't weak at all. Wei Shih, Fang Baidu, Su Tianya, and Qinqing Di were 4 martial immortals. Any 2 of them could deal with the enemy. However, Mei Qinglian was worried about the southern barbarians and the fact that there was more than one prime sovereign in the northern Yan. She was afraid that they would secretly collude with each other, which would be troublesome. When Shen Feiying saw that Mei Qinglian and the others were actually hesitating, he was also a little unwilling. He gritted his teeth and said, "Saintess, the truth is that Song Wan's hostility towards our holy church is also because of you. That bastard has always slandered you in private." Mei Qinglian frowned. "Me? I don't think I've seen him more than a few times." Shen Feiying said, "When Song Wan's Vajra sect was just rising, he wanted to join our holy cult. At that time, you were in charge of the northern Yan, Saintess. In the end, you drove him out, so he has always held a grudge and slandered you in private. His intentions should be put to death." Shen Feiying added, "We found out about this after the incident. If you don't believe me, you can ask Bai Wuji." Bai Wuji nodded, proving that Shen Feiying was right. Mei Qinglian thought for a moment and said, "That's true. This person looked at me in an improper way, which made me feel disgusted. He has not joined our holy cult yet, but he has already started to stir up trouble. He is not a stable character. Our holy cult is not afraid of greedy people or ambitious people. However, it would be troublesome to keep this kind of person who was an expert at stirring up internal strife. So, I directly chased him out. By the way, you said he slandered me. What did he slander about me?" Shen Feiying carefully looked at Mei Qinglian and said, "He said that you are already so old, why are you pretending to be a saintess? You are more like a saintess. He also said that you use your beauty to win the favor of the cult master Chu. Otherwise, how can a woman be qualified to be one of the leaders of the Kunlun devil cult? He also said that since ancient times, women cannot achieve anything, only ruin things. For the Kunlun devil cult to raise a woman to such a position, it must be." Shen Feiying did not dare to continue. Because Mei Qinglian's pretty face was extremely gloomy. The karmic fire of the red lotus circled around her like a volcano that was about to erupt. "That bastard. I will cut him into 1,000 pieces. I will use the karmic fire to train my heart while cutting him into 1,000 pieces." Mei Qinglian, who was calmly analyzing the pros and cons of her attack, was now completely enraged. She even wanted to kill her way to the northern Yan. Lu Jianghu, who was standing at the side, curled his lips slightly. He thought to himself that Song Wan was right. Women were really prone to ruin things. Once it involved him, they would immediately lose their cool. Of course, the Red Lotus Demon Sovereign was an exception. He would remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. The woman he loved was indeed different. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded, "Who provoked you? Who are you going to cut into 1,000 pieces?" Seeing Chu Xiu walk in from outside, everyone's eyes immediately revealed a look of surprise and surprise. Ning Xuanji had taken Chu Xiu away in a mysterious manner. No one knew what he was up to. Of course, no one suspected that he was trying to harm Chu Xiu. It was not because they trusted Ning Xuanji's character, but because at Ning Xuanji's level, if he really wanted to kill Chu Xiu, it would basically be a matter of a slap. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Originally, they thought that Chu Xiu would be gone for a long time. They did not expect that Chu Xiu would return in less than 2 months. Chu Xiu asked, "What happened? Did something happen in the pugilistic world?" At this moment, Shen Feiying saw that Chu Xiu had arrived. He immediately told Chu Xiu everything that had happened with an aggrieved expression. Of course, in front of Chu Xiu, Shen Feiying didn't dare to add fuel to the fire. He recounted everything that had happened from beginning to end. After hearing it, Chu Xiu only responded with an "oh" to indicate that he understood. Mei Qinglian said unhappily, "He doesn't even care about our saint sect. Don't you have anything to say?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't be angry. Isn't this very normal? When has our saint sect ever been loved by everyone? This kind of thing is actually very normal. I had already thought of it when I was in the upper realm. If the prime sovereigns want to establish sects in the lower realm, where will the disciples come from? Where will the people come from? Of course they will recruit a group of people from the lower realm. As for these people in the lower realm, not to mention other places, even in the northern Yan kingdom, there are many people who hold grudges against our holy church. Or perhaps some who are ambitious, but our saint's sect cannot satisfy their ambitions. Naturally, they will look for another way out. Prime sovereigns from Exalted Major are a good way out for them, so isn't it normal for Vajragate's Song to perform so well? So what do you plan to do now? Although the saint sect's main forces are not in the northern Yan land, the northern Yan royal family has fully submitted to our saint sect. Moreover, the northern Yan land has been under our control for the longest time. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. What do you plan to do? Of course I have to let the Daoist know that they have to abide by the rules of the lower realm. At the same time, we have to let those people in the lower realm know that in the lower realm, our holy sect dominates the pugilistic world. In the Dalio heaven, our holy sect also dominates the eastern domain. Shen Feiying's eyes lit up at this. He was willing to become a lackey of the Kunlun devil cult and be reviled by the northern Yan pugilistic world. What was he after? All he wanted was a master who could help him when he was wronged. Even if Shen Feiying was a lackey, he could only be a lackey for the strong. In one of the most luxurious courtyards of the northern Yan guardian sect. This used to be Song Wan's personal residence, but he had now given it to Venerable Crimson Dawn. At this moment, Song Wanjing had his head lowered as he reported to Reverend Shi Xia about the establishment of the sect. Don't worry, Master. The sect will be completed in 3 months. Your disciple will prepare a grand founding ceremony for you and make the Crimson Dawn divine sect famous in the pugilistic world. Venerable Crimson Dawn wore a crimson Daoist robe with a fiery cloud crown on his head. His face was square and elegant, and he had a profound temperament. But in fact, he was not considered outstanding among the prime sovereigns of the Daoist world. His lineage had become a prime sovereign halfway through. The Crimson Dawn divine sect had been in the Daoist world for a long time, but it had taken the elite route and trained very few disciples, no more than 10 in each generation. But as the number of disciples increased, the Crimson Dawn divine sect could no longer take the elite route. It could only be passed down to a single disciple, which was why it had hidden itself in the mountains and became a prime sovereign. This time, Reverend Crimson Afterglow was the most fervent. He wanted to establish a sect in the lower realms, rebuild the Crimson Afterglow divine sect, and restore the glory of his ancestors. In fact, Venerable Crimson Dawn looked down on Song Wan. The Daoist prime sovereigns had always been aloof and virtuous, and Venerable Crimson Dawn loathed people who were full of worldly air. But Venerable Crimson Dawn was the first person to seek refuge in the lower realm, and he was sensible, obedient, and strong, which saved him a lot of trouble in establishing a new sect. So even if Venerable Crimson Dawn didn't like him, he still accepted him as a disciple. At this time, a disciple suddenly came to report that the leader of the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu, had personally come to visit. Song Wan was not surprised to hear that the Kunlun devil cult had come. If the other party did not respond, it would not be the Kunlun devil cult. So he immediately said to Venerable Crimson Dawn, Master, the Kunlun devil cult must be unhappy with us for invading the northern Yan imperial palace to establish a sect. They have always been domineering, but with Master here this time, they must have kicked an iron plate and can only return in defeat. Song Wan was still flattering Venerable Crimson Dawn, but he did not notice the slight change in Venerable Crimson Dawn's expression. Chapter 1379. Venerable Crimson Dawn did not know that Song Wan's actions were related to the Kunlun devil cult. He was a primeval sovereign of the exalted heaven. He had only been in the lower realm for 2 months, and most of the matters were handled by Song Wan. How could he possibly know that the current emperor of northern Yan, Xiangli, was single-handedly raised to the throne by Chu Xiu? The giant spirit gang and Snowdrift city of the extreme north were all vassals of the Kunlun demon cult. But intuition told Venerable Crimson Dawn that the other party did not come with good intentions. Outside the Vajra Gate, Chu Xiu studied the exterior of the Vajra Gate. It was not a grand building, but it was a rather large one. On the way here, Chu Xiu had heard of Song Wan's actions. He was a character, but not a big one. The other party had seized the two opportunities of the Great Light Temple being destroyed and the attack on the Heavenly Gate to leap up and become one of the 8 sections. If Zai had developed steadily for a period of time, he might have been able to advance further in this era of great battles. Unfortunately, everything was over now. Song Wan's hostility towards the Kunlun devil cult was not wrong. Chu Xiu was not so narcissistic as to think that all sects should fear and respect him. Song Wan's fatal flaw was that he was too anxious. It didn't matter how much he viewed the Kunlun demon sect in the dark. But he didn't even understand the situation in the Great Haven Law Heavens and had already started to seek refuge with Reverend Qi Xia. Not only that, he even provoked the Kunlun demon sect. He had made the wrong move and there was no chance for him to turn back. Venerable Crimson Dawn hurried out and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. He laughed and said, "Cult Master Chu has arrived. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. I did not have the time to chat with Cult Master Chu during the Grand Assembly of Ancient Lords. Since we have time today, we can talk about martial arts and get to know each other better." Chu Xiu said lightly, "I'm a little surprised that Venerable Qi Xia is so kind. I thought Venerable Qi Xia would just kick me out." Looking at Chu Xiu's attitude and his ambiguous words, Venerable Qi Xia was taken aback. He then burst out laughing, "What are you talking about, Cult Master Chu? Who didn't know the prestige of the Lord of the Eastern Domain? Cult Master Chu, you've come to my place as a guest, and I can't wait to welcome you, so how could I possibly drive you out?" Song Wan, who was following behind Reverend Qi Xia, could already feel that something was amiss. Beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. Venerable Qi Xia's attitude was very cold, not only to Song Wan, but also to the other primordial sovereigns who came down with him. Song Wan had seen this with his own eyes. But today, when he saw Chu Xiu, Venerable Qi Xia's performance had him taken aback. Although he was not trying to curry favor, he was carefully flattering Chu Xiu. It was obvious that he was putting Chu Xiu in a higher position than himself. In fact, Song Wan was very good at reading people. Venerable Qi Xia was indeed cautious. He had only met Chu Xiu during the Grand Assembly of Ancient Lords, but had not had any dealings with him. But then, the rumors about Chu Xiu involuntarily drifted into his ears. He killed Yi Weikong of Cold River City, single-handedly turned the tables and defeated the Southern Domain. In the end, he even counterattacked the Southern Domain, forcing the Sword Sect under the heavens. If it was not for the 3 Pristines Temple who came to stop him, the Sword Sect under the heavens would no longer exist in the Daoist. What shocked Venerable Qi Xia the most was the exposure of Chu Xiu's identity in the lower realm. This person had the identity of a lower realm and a lower realm, deceiving all the Daoist people. Even the patriarch of the Sanskrit sect was threatened by the other party. Although Venerable Qi Xia did not know much about what happened 500 years ago, and he did not know why the sect leader of Sanskrit was so afraid, he knew one thing: Chu Xiu had a terrifying trump card, so powerful that they could not afford to offend him. That was why Venerable Qi Xia was so cautious when he saw Chu Xiu. Staring at Venerable Qi Xia, Chu Xiu smiled faintly. "You don't dare to kick me out?" However, the Venerable One had already chased my men out and even injured my subordinate, Shen Feiying. Venerable Qi Xia was stunned. When did this happen? Why didn't I know? Could there be some kind of misunderstanding here? Chu Xiu said, "You will have to ask your subordinate, sect leader Song Wan. The Northern Yen court was raised by the Kunlun devil cult, but your subordinate stole the palace of the Northern Yen court to build his own sect." My men had only gone to ask about it, but before they could even finish a single sentence, they were sent flying back with a slap to the face. Venerable Qi Xia's lineage, how mighty, how domineering. I didn't say anything when the Daoist venerables came down to the Northern Yen. Although the Northern Yen is under the Kunlun devil cult's control, the Kunlun devil cult is not intolerant. But from the looks of it, you're planning to let this Scarlet Afterglow divine sect of yours, which has yet to be established, dominate the northern Yan kingdom, and let my Kunlun demon sect make space for you? As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, Venerable Qixia turned to Song Wan, a cold glint in his eyes. Bastard! Are you the one who did all this? Song Wan wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. Master, listen to me. As soon as the words left his mouth, Venerable Qixia slapped him across the face, sending him flying. He cursed, Bastard! Why didn't you tell me? Why did you take matters into your own hands? If not for Cult Master Chu's visit, I wouldn't have known that you did such a despicable thing. Venerable Qixia turned to Chu Xiu and bowed apologetically. It is my fault for not being strict with my subordinates. Please forgive me, Cult Master Chu. That's it? Chu Xiu asked. Venerable Qixia was taken aback, then his face darkened. I've already taught my subordinate a lesson and apologized. What more does Cult Master Chu want? Do you want me to kowtow and hold a banquet to apologize? Chu Xiu replied coldly, I can't bring myself to humiliate a prime sovereign like this. But I've given you face, Venerable Qixia, so you must give me face as well. Shen Feiying is one of my men, one of the earliest vassal sects to submit to the Kunlun devil cult. Be it the Daoist or the lower realm, anyone who touches my men should be forgiven with a slap. Is that even possible? Hand over Song Wan and the lands of the northern Yan royalty. Venerable Qixia, if you wish to establish a sect in northern Yan, I will not stop you. In fact, I will even cooperate. Impossible. Venerable Qixia refused without hesitation. Perhaps prime sovereigns like them were not suited for sects, but that did not mean they were idiots. Song Wan was now his disciple and the first person to submit to him since he arrived in the lower realm. Handing him over to Chu Xiu would be a slap to his face. And a slap to the point of death. Chu Xiu raised an eyebrow. Venerable Qixia, are you really not going to hand him over? As soon as Chu Xiu's voice trailed off, a faint demonic aura emanated from behind him, stirring the power of laws in the air and shaking Venerable Qixia's heart. Only then did he realize that Chu Xiu was already a 5th-layer martial immortal, the same level as him. But everyone knew that Chu Xiu's combat prowess had nothing to do with his cultivation level. When he was at the 3rd layer, he was already able to kill opponents who were 2 or 3 layers above him. Now that he was at the 5th layer, how much more powerful would he be? Venerable Qixia gritted his teeth. I will return the lands of the northern Yan royalty. When the time comes, I will find another place to establish my sect. Chu Xiu took a step forward. Venerable Qixia followed. Cult Master Chu, how do you intend to punish Song Wan? Even if you want to cripple him, I can punish him myself. But he must be here with me. Just then, a few figures stepped out from behind Chu Xiu. Their auras were equally powerful. Qin Qingdi, Wei Shiya, Su Tianya, and Fang Baidu. For martial immortals. Just Chu Xiu alone was enough to put him under great pressure, let alone the 4 behind him. Venerable Qixia bellowed, Chu Xiu. What do you want? Don't forget, we are both from the same bloodline as the Guzun. Are you not going to give me face? Chu Xiu sneered. Guzun. Do you still think I'm some Guzun? I'm lying. Also, one had to fight for their reputation, not be given to them by others. Venerable Qixia, when you wanted to establish your sect in the northern Yan, did you ever think of giving me face? You didn't even send someone to greet me. Why should I give you face now? Are you not going to abide by the rules of the Guzun conference? Venerable Qixia asked. Chu Xiu replied coolly, I'm not a Guzun anymore. Why should I abide by the rules of the Guzun conference? He took a step forward. The demonic aura behind Chu Xiu had already formed a blurry, sinister figure. But it was shrouded in chaos, making it impossible to see the figure clearly. Venerable Qixia, are you going to hand this man over or not? Cold sweat began to form on Venerable Qixia's forehead. Given Chu Xiu's reputation in the Daoist world, He had no doubt that Chu Xiu would really take action or was just bluffing. The number of martial immortals that died at Chu Xiu's hands was not just one or two. Chu Xiu, you've participated in the Guzun conference. You should know that Headmaster Meng, before Venerable Qi Xia could finish his sentence, Chu Xiu interrupted him and sneered, Meng Xinghe? If he had the chance, he would kill me immediately. But I'm still alive and kicking. Are you going to use him to pressure me? Venerable Qixia bellowed when he saw Chu Xiu's hand on the hilt of the saber hanging from his waist. His stellar energy erupted. Just when Song Wan thought his master was going to fight Chu Xiu for his sake, Venerable Qixia bellowed, Fine, I'll hand him over then. Chu Xiu, I'll remember today's humiliation. We'll settle this score in the future. With that, Venerable Qixia's figure turned into a beam of scarlet light and disappeared into the horizon. Song Wan's expression changed from one of hope to one of despair. He had never imagined that his newly acknowledged master would abandon him so decisively without even making a move. Song Wan's eyes were filled with fear and indignation as he stared at Chu Xiu. He fell to his knees and begged for mercy. Cult Master Chu, please spare my life. I was blinded by greed and wanted to please Venerable Qixia. That old man has offended the holy sect. Please spare my life, Cult Master Chu. The Vajra sect is willing to join the Kunlun Devil cult and serve the Kunlun Devil cult. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.